Who are some of the rotten and most horrible criminals we covered in 2023? Let's get right to it with this marathon video. What are a few of the most common scams today? Let's find out, starting with number 7. Worse than a catfish. An anonymous man got a call from a woman named Hallie Conley from Homestead, Florida, for what he thought was a little hanky-panky. Hallie invited the guy to her house, so of course he went. But it wasn't the romantic date he expected waiting for him in that homestead bedroom. Instead, there was a man named Isaiah Perez sitting in a chair with Hallie. A bit weird, but the guy apparently stayed to see how things were going to play out. But then Hallie left the room and returned with another guy named Rafael Cyprian, who was holding a firearm. Cyprian immediately threatened the man's life, like it was something he just does every day. He was after the guy's cash and his Android phones. None of these items were worth his life, so fine, here's the stuff. No problem, right? The man handed over his cash and phone, but Cyprian didn't decide to let this guy off the hook. But he was able to put up a fight, get free, and call the cops. The police swooped in, and thankfully, Conley, Cyprian, and Perez were arrested. Online dating is already dangerous enough as it is these days. Some men aren't exactly the smartest and will follow a hot girl anywhere. Number 6. The Wild Wild East. A multi-million-dollar shoplifting ring in New York and New Jersey was broken apart after a year-long investigation, with police ending up right on the ringleader's doorstep. So, what happened? There were these 23 people who decided to take shoplifting to a whole new level. They weren't just swiping candy bars and hairbrushes either. They were running a well-oiled, highly organized shoplifting empire. It was like Ocean's 11, but instead of casinos, they hit up CVS, Duane Reade, Rite Aid, and Ulta Beauty. These shoplifters had their own shopping catalog, like the bad guy version of an Amazon wish list. They'd roll into the stores, grab the specific items they were told to snatch, and then run out. And they weren't swiping these goods for fun. They were on a mission. After nabbing the loot, they'd bring it all back to their secret lair in Jersey City, where they'd list everything on eBay. Unsuspecting buyers, thinking they were scoring incredible deals, were actually getting stolen goodies delivered to their doorsteps. You might wonder how much these shoplifters got paid for their sticky-fingered escapades. Well, they were raking in good money to someone that does shoplifting for a living, sometimes up to $675 for a single night's work. Eventually, the Bayonne Police Department noticed a pattern in shoplifting arrests. Suspects kept mumbling about a catalog and getting paid to steal specific things. So the cops kicked into high gear, and 14 months later, they busted the whole gang. They recovered a whopping $3 million in stolen goods, froze $4.5 million in bank accounts, and arrested 11 of the 23 shoplifters, including the boss, Stephen Williams. This goes to show that you never know what's behind those too-good-to-be-true deals online. And the next time you stroll through your local pharmacy, you might give those over-the-counter meds a second glance, wondering if they've been on a wild adventure before hitting the shelves. Number 5. The Facebook Marketplace Scam. You know Facebook Marketplace, where you can sell your old stuff to make a quick buck or find that perfect coffee table that'll tie your living room together. Kayla Houlihan, a business owner in Australia, almost got lured into a scam not once, not twice, but 4 times in a single week. Kayla posted her TV for sale on Facebook, and within hours, she had 4 potential buyers. At first, she was like, hey, it must be my lucky day. But all the buyers had the same script. Someone else was coming to pick up the TV, and they insisted on using Pay ID so their kid or partner could pick up the TV without having to pay cash up front. But it was a trap. Once the seller agreed to the payment, they'd say the transaction couldn't go through because they lacked a business Pay ID account. Then they claimed to have sent extra money to upgrade the account and even sent a fake email as proof. They'd pressure the seller to refund this imaginary money, but guess what? No real cash ever landed in the seller's account. As it turns out, it wasn't just Kayla. Aussies all over were getting roped into this Pay ID impersonation scam. And the numbers don't lie. In 1 year year alone, ScamWatch reported over $260,000 lost to this type of scam. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. One person posted on Facebook Marketplace and boom, they got the scammy messages. Another tried Gumtree, same story. So here's the golden rule, folks. If someone asks you to transfer money so they can give it back to you, your scam radar should be screaming like a fire alarm on steroids. Fortunately, Kayla didn't fall for the scam, but used her story to warn others. Number 4. The strange DMs. One day, Ramona Mihalachi, a celebrity hairdresser, received a seemingly innocent direct message from a friend. The friend asked for a favor, to endorse a flower shop as part of an online vote. Ramona, being the kind soul she is, didn't think twice. She clicked on the link, thinking she was doing a good deed. But that innocent-looking link was like opening a cursed pharaoh's tomb. Within moments, scammers had infiltrated Ramona's Instagram account. They started posting stories that touted the wonders of Bitcoin mining and claimed she had turned 2,000 pounds into 20,000 pounds in just 3 hours of trading. And her 700 followers, including big shots like TV presenter Susanna Reid and models strutting their stuff at London Fashion Week. Ramona only realized the horror when her friends started reaching out, congratulating her on her newfound Bitcoin fortune. She tried to log into her Instagram account, but her password had been changed. As desperation set in, she reached out to Instagram's customer support for help. Ramona got a message on WhatsApp that seemed to be from Instagram support, but it actually was the scammers using the Instagram logo to trick her. They said they were going to help her recover her hacked account, and she believed them. So they asked for verification codes and her ID, which she willingly handed over. The scammers had now infiltrated her email addresses and even her bank account, and they were changing all her personal details. It was a digital heist in progress. In the end, she managed to secure her account and avoid financial disaster, but the emotional toll was undeniable. So the next time a link pops up, even if it's from a close friend, take a minute, ask yourself if it's legit, and remember, the internet can be a dangerous place. Number 3, the postage scam. Now we're gonna go down under. Picture this. You're eagerly waiting for a package, that online shopping haul you've been daydreaming about. You've been refreshing your tracking updates more times than you'd like to admit. Finally, you get a text message, but it's not what you were hoping for. Your shipment, it says, has failed, and they need you to update your shipping address. Panic sets in. Your precious package is in limbo. Now, before we go any further, let us introduce you to an unnamed savvy online shopper from Sydney. She's just a regular person like any of us, scrolling through her phone, tracking her beauty products, but she almost got caught in the spider web of a scam. She received this text message from the Australia Post that seemed legit. There was an online link. She clicked on it, and she ended up on a website that looked exactly like the official Australia Post site. It asked for an updated address, and she happily filled it in. But then came the curveball. A second page popped up asking for her credit card details. Red flags, anyone? The website said there's a redelivery fee. The woman was just about to give away her precious credit card info when fate intervened. Her package arrived on her desk. At that moment, she realized how close she came to being scammed. She thought she was immune to these scams, and who could blame her? The text looked authentic. The website seemed like the real deal, and she was expecting a delivery. The scam is becoming more and more common, so the Australia Post wants you to remember one thing. They'd never, ever contact you via SMS or email asking for personal or financial information or payments. So if you're from down under and get a text asking for that credit card number, it's a scam. And that sneaky website? Well, the devil's in the details. Always check the web address, especially at the bottom. If it looks fishy, swim away. Number 2, Snapchat honey trap. Imagine a seemingly innocent Snapchat exchange between two folks. Let's call them Jack and Lauren. They were just having some fun, sharing the occasional spicy pic, the kind of stuff you'd think vanishes in the digital abyss, right? Well, when it comes to the internet, nothing is ever truly gone. Lauren, a Snapchat user, decided to take things to a whole new level. She'd been swapping some explicit photos with Jack, creating a virtual bond through screens. But then, out of the blue, she pulled the plug on their virtual romance. But instead of just ending things, Lauren unleashed the beast, blackmail. She demanded cash from Jack, not just a little. She wanted his family inheritance money. Lauren threatened to send those intimate pics to Jack's family and plaster them all over social media. Terrified and cornered, Jack started shelling out the dough. He borrowed from friends, dipped into his family's inheritance, and even took out a payday loan. The total damage? Over 28,000 pounds. And this went on for 9 months. Lauren even invented a fictional boyfriend named Liam who played the role of the villain, demanding cash to keep those pics locked away. Eventually, Jack was left high and dry, financially drained, and emotionally scarred. The toll this took on him was unbelievable. It almost makes you wonder what was in the photos that Jack was willing to spend that much on to keep private. Remember, folks, in the digital age, those pics are like a double-edged sword. They can cut both ways. Or maybe we should just all agree to do away with social media entirely? Does anyone actually like it? Besides, it seems like it has done far more harm than it has good. Number 1. New device added. A businesswoman named Savannah Jackson in Queenstown, New Zealand, learned the hard way that even the most vigilant person can slip up. Savannah is your typical hyper-aware type when it comes to sketchy texts and scams. She's the one who'd spot a fake email from a mile away. Well, usually. But one fateful day, while juggling work and life, she got a text from her bank, BNZ. The message was one of those just to confirm a new device has been added to your account messages. So she clicked on the link. It looked official, but it was not. Within minutes, her entire business account, a whopping $42,000, vanished into thin air. All her hard-earned money for staff wages, bills, and taxes, gone. Savannah realized her mistake almost immediately and called the bank in a panic, but they said it was too late. The money already hopped into the hands of a third-party company named Wise, and there was nothing she could do about it. 2 weeks later, Savannah was in the middle of a battle to reclaim her money. She was on the phone with BNZ daily, demanding updates on the status of the investigation, and it doesn't look like Savannah is going to get her money back. How can a major bank like BNZ and their fraud department not get through to a major international funds transfer company, she wondered. It's a question that leaves us scratching our heads too. You'd think these big players would have a direct hotline, right? Let's be crystal clear about one thing. Your bank will never send you an email or text message with a link to log in or ask for your account details. As with any scam, you're always going to be your first and best line of defense. So stay vigilant and educate yourself as much as you can. Who are some of the most despicable people out there doing crimes? Let's find out, starting with number 5, the extortionist. Street performer Emilia Laporta forced an autistic man to pose with her for pictures and then made him pay her $100. Emilia's business model was simple. She walked around Times Square and charged people $100 to take pictures with her. But her business wasn't that straightforward. Sometimes she wasn't upfront with what she charged and basically tricked men into posing with her and then coerced them into paying her a fee. Women that walk around doing this sort of business are officially called desnudas. One day, while walking around in Times Square, she met a man who had just finished attending a program for people with autism. Amelia and another woman who was similarly dressed, or underdressed, approached him and offered to take a picture with him. The man told them he didn't have any money, so they told him not to worry about it. Unfortunately for the man, the moment he took the picture, he became a customer. After they took the pictures with his phone, they began harassing him to pay up. He didn't have money on him, so they took him to the ATM and forced him to withdraw $100. The man's mother noticed the withdrawal and asked him about it. He told her about his ordeal with the woman, and she decided to report the incident to the police. So, the police promptly moved in and arrested Amelia, charging her with grand larceny through extortion. They couldn't find the other woman yet, though. Number 4. Money never buys love. 83-year-old Pat Breitkreutz lost almost $100,000 after someone defrauded her through a romance scam. She met the scammer, who called himself Lewis, through a dating website for older adults. Lewis, who said he was 62, encouraged her to text off the dating site, and she agreed. They didn't have too many phone calls since Lewis had an accent that made it very hard for Pat to understand him. Before long, Lewis and Pat were in a romantic relationship. He would send her sweet good morning messages and call her his queen. He also sent her pictures of himself, but never agreed to FaceTime with her. Perhaps that should have been her first sign that something was wrong. Lewis claimed to work for a construction company in Montreal and asked Pat for money to support his business. She sent him 5 checks that totaled around $98.50. Through all this, Lewis made constant plans to visit her, and he even sent her a picture of a plane ticket with his name on it. Sadly, he never showed up. Pat only realized the extent of the scam when Lewis sent her a contract asking for $500,000 to invest in his construction business. The contract listed a Fort Wayne address, but when when Pat checked it out in person, she saw that the address was fake. Lewis, on the other hand, stopped texting her after he realized that she didn't have any more money to give him. The scam broke Pat's heart, and she now says she feels extremely lonely after her ordeal. She doesn't expect to ever get her money back, but said she's still hoping she can find love. Number 3. Bounced checks. Christopher Blake built a criminal career for himself by scamming dozens of people through the pretext of running a charity. Blake ran a bogus veterans charity that held events at locations he never paid for and advertised raffle draw prizes he didn't have. He also invited a former NFL running back for a guest appearance and never paid him either. Blake's entire shtick came crashing down when he went to a community forum and took a picture with the sheriff of the town his charity was in. As soon as the sheriff posted the picture, he got flooded with complaints from people who said Blake owed them money. So, the sheriff decided to get to work and assigned a detective to investigate Blake's charity to see if there was any truth to the complaints he'd gotten. When the detective began snooping around Blake's Second Chance Veterans Foundation charity, he found evidence of fraud right away. The charity hosted a raffle draw where it claimed it would be giving out a Harley-Davidson bike. But when a local dealer was contacted, they said they never donated the bike to the charity. The detective also found out that Blake hadn't paid rent for about 6 months at his office. Blake's office building landlord introduced the detective as a friend, and right then and there, Blake tried to sell a ticket to win the non-existent Harley-Davidson bike. Blake then invited the detective to a golf club where the charity was hosting a fundraising event. At the club, the detective learned that Blake had charged 40 people $100 each to play golf and eat lunch at the club. He also learned that the $6,500 check Blake paid the club for the event had bounced. Blake had scammed other people too. A manager of a Holiday Inn donated $100 to the charity and gave him 4 discounted rooms at the hotel. But when Blake paid for the rooms, the check bounced. He also scammed former NFL running back Gerald Riggs, who played for the Atlanta Falcons and Washington Redskins during the 1980s and early 90s. Riggs had made an appearance at Blake's fundraising event and had negotiated a $2,500 appearance fee, but even that check bounced. In the end, Blake scammed multiple people out of at least $20,000. He was eventually arrested and jailed on a charge of organized to defraud. Number 2. Unkept promises. Isaac Grossman scammed retirees by promising them bogus returns on a false investment. By the time Grossman was caught, he had raised around $2.4 million from retirees all over the country by selling them lies about his company and his person. Grossman told the retirees that he had a business called Dragon Click. He explained that Dragon Click had developed a proprietary technology that allowed users to upload a picture of an item they wanted to buy, and it would feed them links to all the online retailers selling that item. That way, users would be able to choose the best price by aggregating all the prices of the item on the internet. If that sort of technology existed, it would completely change the face of e-commerce. Grossman told his potential investors that the tech had revolutionary potential and they could eventually double or triple their investments. He also told them that he just needed the money from their investments to finish developing the technology and that he was on the verge of selling the tech to a huge tech corporation like Apple and Google. What Grossman failed to tell his potential clients was that he had been permanently barred by the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority from acting as a broker-dealer or associating with any broker-dealer. He also failed to tell them that he'd been banned permanently from commodities trading by the USC. So even if the investment opportunities he was selling were real, which they were not, he was still committing a crime by selling them. And Grossman wasn't just breaking the law by selling these investment opportunities. He was also breaking the law by misappropriating the money he got from his investors. He used around $1.3 million on diamond jewelry, luxury cars, gambling, and tuition fees for his children. He also owned a 4.81 carat diamond ring, a Corvette, and a McLaren MP412C. Unfortunately for Grossman, all his money couldn't save him from the authorities. He was eventually arrested and pled guilty to wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering charges and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Number 1. Affordable bribes. 3 women have been accused of taking almost $1 million in bribes to allow ineligible applicants to get access to cheap housing in New York City. Anna Trebek, Irina Zelster, and Karina Andrian all conspired to collect bribes to help ineligible applicants buy a total of 18 affordable housing apartments in Coney Island. The scam lasted for 6 years while the trio ran a housing corporation board. The board the women ran was in charge of approving applications for high-demand cooperative apartments at the Luna Park Housing Corporation in Coney Island. The homes the women approved for ineligible applicants as part of their fraudulent schemes are worth around $5 million in total. They were set to be sold for significantly lower than the market price, so of course they were in high demand. However, there was a catch. Only a few people were eligible to send in applications, and these applications were supposed to be processed in the order in which they were received. To be eligible for the apartments, you needed to be either an internal applicant who just wanted to move from one home to another, an applicant who lived with owners and was looking for succession ownership rights, or an external applicant who had no prior ownership. Since the apartments were in such high demand, there was a waiting list that was years long. But instead of just approving the apartments for people on the list, the 3 women connived to approve the apartments for ineligible applicants who were bumped up in the order. The housing department always approved all the applications that the women submitted, as their office was supposed to get those applications and make sure they were in order. But instead of doing that, they took bribes and forged accompanying documents submitted with the fraudulent housing applications. For example, the criminal trio forged income verification and birth certificates to prove family relationships for those applying for successor ownership rights. At one point, Zelster received around $93,000 to help an applicant purchase a 3-bedroom home. She also told the applicant that she would need to apply as a successor tenant and claim that the woman who was on record as the tenant was her sister. According to the police, this particular sale went through after Zelster submitted fake documents showing that the applicant and the current owner of the building were siblings. Trebek, another one of the women, solicited a $26,000 cash bribe from an applicant. After the bribe was paid, she also altered the documents of the applicant to show that she was related to the current owner of the building they wanted to buy. So what did these 3 women use their loot to buy? Well, they purchased dozens of fur coats, designer handbags, and jewelry. The police found all of these luxury items when their homes were raided after their scams were exposed by a whistleblower. Officials also claim that 2 of the women purchased homes in Hollywood Beach, Florida through the bribes they took. Maybe they wanted to retire in Florida after getting fat off their fraud. Who knows? The 3 women were charged with 4th and 5th degree conspiracy, 2nd degree grand larceny, 2nd degree forgery, and 1st degree falsifying business records. We somehow don't think they'll be retiring to Hollywood Beach anytime soon. What are some of the craziest robberies criminals will try to do? Let's find out, starting with number 6, masks off. Brothers Benjamin Murphy and George Murphy Bristow dressed up as old men to commit armed robbery. The brothers arrived at a local jewelry store wearing extremely lifelike latex face masks, making them look like they're balding older men. They demanded that the staff let them in, and for some reason, the request was granted. Once they were inside, an employee brought them to the back office, where the disguised men tied him to a chair with cable ties and removed his Rolex watch worth $18,226 from his wrist. The 2 menaced everyone with a knife and a hatchet, then searched the staff area for more valuable items before the alarm was finally raised. So they fled the scene in a getaway vehicle parked outside. A few weeks later, the police pulled over a suspicious vehicle 36 miles from where the robbery occurred. They identified the driver as George and found 2 full face masks and clothing identical to that worn by the robbery suspects. George was apparently not very good about keeping his car clean. Officers probably found some ancient French fries under his seat as well. Anyway, officers also uncovered a black bag containing the hatchet, knife, and cable ties used during the incident. Investigators performed a forensic examination into the saliva found inside the 2 masks and linked the DNA to George and Benjamin. Authorities arrested both men and charged them with robbery and possession of a bladed article. The brothers pleaded not guilty in court, but the jury only needed an hour to declare that the 2 men were guilty guilty. George received 18 years behind bars, and Benjamin received a 13-year sentence. Number 5. A Florida robbery story. A gang used a jackhammer to knock out the alarms of a jewelry store so they could steal over $500,000 worth of jewelry. The robbery occurred at Boo Daddy Diamonds in Hollywood, Florida, and took under 5 minutes. The thieves broke into the store through the roof and dropped down into the showroom. They used a jackhammer to disable the alarm system and cut through its wires. However, they didn't realize that a Ring camera captured the entire incident, as well as their faces and other identifiable information about the robbers. In the video, the thieves walked around the store and picked up anything they thought was valuable. They grabbed a rare Chanel bag and a bottle of Louis XIII cognac valued at $3,500. One of the men was walking around with a flashlight in his mouth when he noticed the camera, prompting him to flash the light at one of his accomplices. The suspects then fled the scene with $500,000 worth of goods. As of the release of this video, authorities have yet to catch the robbers, but they have fingerprints, DNA, and pictures from the scene. The owner is hopeful that they'll be brought to justice soon. It sounds like it's just a matter of time. It's kind of funny though, because these guys obviously had a plan. The owner said they had this big jamming device with a bunch of antennas that they used to mess with the security system before they cut the wires. It sounds like this cool specialized piece of equipment that the tech guy made for them, since every heist gang has a tech guy, right? But they were still caught by a silly Ring camera you buy off of Amazon. It sounds like they need a new tech guy. Number 4. Mountain High Heist. Thieves carried out a daring high-altitude heist when they scaled a Swiss mountain to steal cash from a donation box at the top. The group traversed gorges and climbed 7,710 feet to reach the box, which belonged to a local climbing club that maintained the route. The climbing route is one of the most challenging in the country. It has scaling ladders secured to vertical rock face and then steel cables for traversing gorges. The climbing club relied on donations to maintain the trail, so the donation box was crucial. Members of the group of thieves used brute force to access the box, using tools to smash it and drain it of all cash. Many believe that the heist was planned sometime in advance, as the hike was too intense for the criminals to do on a whim. Due to the route's popularity, it was almost impossible to track down the culprits. It was also difficult to know how much money was stolen, although club members estimated it was likely around $550. Hikers often donate to maintaining hiking paths and climbing routes in Switzerland, and avid climbers urge people to not be afraid of donating due to the incident. And sure, $550 is a lot of money, but not that much money. Why go to all the trouble and risk your life for such a small amount? They also must be experienced, since they were aware of the box and how to get to it, so they would know that the donation benefits everyone. Some people. Number 3. Gone in 19 seconds. A Texas thief stole $200,000 worth of property from a public parking lot in under 20 seconds. Adam Lewis and his family enjoyed a relaxing day at the beach, but when they finished, Lewis was unable to park his Ford F-250 Limited with an 18-foot flatbed trailer, which was carrying his 2021 Polaris Northstar Edition in the parking garage of his apartment building. Lewis reserved 2 spots in a pay-to-park public parking lot in Dallas, with plans to take the buggy to the shop for maintenance the following day. However, when he returned to the parking lot the next morning, the truck and buggy were gone. The lot's manager confirmed that a security guard from the overnight shift said that a tow truck came into the lot during the night. Security camera footage showed the thief back up to Lewis's trailer and Polaris and put them on his tow truck, a move that only took 19 seconds. Lewis got even more surveillance footage from a nearby Bank of America, which had a better view of the tow truck's plates. Unfortunately, when Lewis filed an insurance claim and reported the theft to the Dallas Police Department, authorities discovered that the truck's Texas Department of Licensing and Registrations number were fake. The police recovered the wreckage of Lewis's truck a few days later, which was completely stripped with the bed, seats, steering wheel, and engine removed. The thieves also took Lewis's 3-year-old daughter's car seat, puzzles, and toys. The stolen property was valued at roughly $200,000. And while Lewis asked anyone with information on the robbery to report it to law enforcement, he knew he would likely never fully recover everything that the thieves took. It was pretty clever for this guy to use a tow truck, since it seems like tow truck guys have this weird kind of authority. Like, if you see a tow truck guy picking up someone's car, you'd never question it. You just assume that this guy is allowed to just take the car and leave, and you move on with your day. Number 2. A briefcase full of cash. And this story begins with three, we'll call them ladies of the night, and two masked men. They stole $96,000 in lawsuit settlement money from Saul Mata Velagis. Velagis was celebrating his $96,000 lawsuit settlement at the Van Cortlandt Motel in the Bronx and decided to call these ladies to join in the celebration. 3 women arrived at his hotel room, and after a few hours of alone time together, probably just talking, one of them suggested that their friend come by to drop off some things that help, let's just say, keep the night going. But instead of showing up with fun, 2 masked men showed up at the motel in the early hours of the morning with firearms. They burst into the room and grabbed Velagis' suitcase full of money. Law enforcement has since released photos of the thieves, including images of the men climbing out of a black minivan when they first arrived at the motel. Velagis was obviously devastated. He said he desperately needed the money to help move his family and fund his nighttime activities, but panicked during the confrontation, making it easy for the criminals to take the money and run. He said he suffered from extreme anxiety after the event and replayed it over and over in his mind, which is understandable. Law enforcement have been unable to locate the 3 women and 2 men or recover Velagis' money. The lesson here is maybe don't invite a bunch of morally compromised strangers to hang out with you when you have $100K laying around in a briefcase. Seriously, he kept almost $100,000 in a briefcase? How cliche can you get? Number 1. The Inside Job. Jobson Marangoni de Castro stole almost $2 million in designer goods and jewelry from 2 guests at the Peninsula Beverly Hills Hotel. De Castro made multiple trips back and forth via Uber to the hotel on the night of the crime. On one of the trips, he spoke to a hotel desk employee and answered security questions to get a key to the victim's hotel room. The victims were 2 Brazilians who were in Beverly Hills for a fashion event. De Castro got into their room, but quickly left when he found one of the victims sleeping. He returned later in the night to remove the suitcases filled with expensive diamond jewelry and other luxury items from the room. A week later, De Castro searched for a buyer on Instagram and traveled to Miami, where he sold the jewelry, which he claimed belonged to his late mother, for $50,000, despite it being worth over $1 million. Clearly, De Castro didn't know what he had or how much it was worth. Investigators got a search warrant for data about De Castro's Uber trips, which they matched to GPS data, De Castro's profile picture, and hotel surveillance footage. There were also 2 AirTags inside one of the suitcases, which law enforcement found across the street from De Castro's Rodeo Drive apartment building. De Castro actually went to the Peninsula Beverly Hills Hotel the night before the theft and charged a meal at the hotel bar to the victim's room, which is both kind of funny but also stupid. Most likely the victims caught De Castro's attention when he saw them wearing elaborate jewelry and expensive clothing. After all, how many couples travel with 6 suitcases for one trip? This guy was always going to get caught too. He memorably talked to hotel employees about getting the key, had dinner there the night before, and was easily traced through his Uber account, didn't know how much the items were worth or whom to sell them to. Maybe next time, leave the crimes to the people who know what they're doing, Jobson. Let's talk about some of the most despicable and heartless criminals around. Let's get right to it, starting with number 5, Crime Family. Jody Bowie, resident of Failsworth in the UK, managed to live a life that most can only dream of. One filled with high-end designer clothes, flashy jewelry, and even cosmetic surgery. But the source of her endless wealth wasn't from her job as a caregiver, it was from her boyfriend, Jonathan Walsh, a crime boss involved in a sophisticated trafficking operation worth £1.36 million. Jody's relationship with Jonathan began while he was serving a 14-year sentence for armed robbery, and it quickly led her into a world of excess and crime. You just never know where Cupid's arrow will strike, right? The couple began a descent into the criminal underworld, orchestrating a sprawling network dealing in all kinds of illegal substances. After her arrest, the court's revelations about Jody's lavish spending during the trial painted a pretty clear picture of a lifestyle that was basically impossible with her ordinary job as an elderly caregiver. She spent her newfound riches on high-end designer clothing, luxury watches, designer handbags, and even indulged in almost £5,000 worth of cosmetic surgery. On top of that, she splurged designer brands like Dolce & Gabbana, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Versace. Jody's association with her boyfriend's criminal activities became apparent as it was obvious that the couple couldn't afford that kind of lifestyle through legitimate means. Jonathan had no declared income, and Jody knew full well where his money came from. Messages exchanged between the couple hinted at the extent of their lifestyle. Discussions of spending on cosmetic surgery worth £4,750 and buying vehicles to facilitate their dealing were just the tip of the iceberg. But the story doesn't end there. Jody's drive to maintain this lifestyle extended to a more serious level when she recruited her own family members into the business. Jody involved her parents, Janice and David, and her older brother, Lee. They were brought into the network to make long trips from their home to the operations hubs. The contraband operation itself was a well-oiled machine, raking in a hefty profit margin. Jonathan Walsh's MO involved buying from wholesale suppliers, then selling it to dealers at a 30% profit. His associates ensured that the operation remained secure and secret, using encrypted phones and a password system to protect their activities. Inevitably, as with most criminal enterprises, law enforcement became aware of the operation, and it wasn't long before they were brought down. A police raid revealed a stash of firearms and other goodies that characterized their criminal activities. Some couriers were even found to be carrying grenades. In court, the family members faced some pretty serious consequences. Jonathan was handed a 15-year prison sentence, and Jody received a 21-month jail term, suspended for 2 years, along with a curfew and unpaid work. Jody's parents, Janice and David, were convicted of conspiracy to transfer criminal property, with David receiving a 10-month suspended sentence and Janice given 12 months custody, suspended for 18 months. In the end, the story of Jody Bowie shows that the relentless pursuit of an excessive lifestyle and easy money is a trap anyone can fall into, even someone's own mom and dad. At least she didn't end up like Tony Montana. Number 4. Masking profits. An unnamed elderly couple from France took legal action against an art dealer who bought an African face mask from them for a mere £129, then turned around and sold it for £3.6 million. It all went down out their home. Among the items they decided to part with was an African Ingle mask from Gabon. The couple found a buyer who was known only as Mr. Z, which, like, come on, Mr. Z? That's a bad guy name? Don't do deals with anyone who only goes by Mr. Z. Anyway, Mr. Z bought the mask at a low price and later sold it for a huge profit at an auctioneer in Montpellier, France. The mask was a rare find outside of Central Africa, with fewer than a dozen known to exist in museums around the world. It had been brought to France by the man's grandfather, a former colonial governor in Africa. The French couple was clueless about the true value of their artifact until they stumbled upon a news article talking about its sale for millions. Filled with a sense of betrayal and deceit, they decided to sue Mr. Z, accusing him of withholding information about the mask's real worth. Court in Nimes froze the proceeds of the sale as it deemed the couple's case to be well-founded in principle. The heart of the dispute revolved around the suspicion that Mr. Z was aware of the mask's value but chose not to disclose it. Instead, he reached out to various auction houses for estimates on its value, with the financial assessment coming from an African artifact specialist. The mask was eventually listed at auction with an estimated value between £259,416 and £345,888. But it sold for much more. To avoid legal action, Mr. Z offered the couple the lower estimate. However, their children turned it down. So what do you think? Was it ethical for a dealer to purchase an item like this for so cheap, aware of its true worth, and resell it for a huge profit? Was this a heartless scam by the dastardly Mr. Z, or simply a savvy business move in the art market of buy a crafty Mr. Z? Let us know in the comments. Number 3. Out of gas. Scammers found a way to bypass payment at gas pumps, effectively hacking the system to siphon off gas for free. The scam employed a Bluetooth-enabled smartphone and, in some cases, a tactic to trick the gas station attendants. In one example, a Detroit man managed to steal nearly 800 gallons of gas, equivalent to almost $3,000 from a Shell station. The scam's operation seems quite simple once you know the trick, which involved overriding the pump's system via Bluetooth, allowing the scammer to gain control remotely. The thief initiated this process using their smartphone. While this was occurring, another individual often distracted the gas station attendants to minimize the interference. The station lost valuable gasoline revenue, which can add up to a substantial loss given the soaring gas prices. When attendants tried to intervene by shutting down the pumps to halt the theft, they were totally powerless as their pumps were controlled by the scammer. While the specifics may differ, this gas pump hacking technique isn't isolated. Another incident took place at a speedway station where the scammers employed a slightly different method. One person distracted the clerk inside with a fake Cash App issue, diverting attention, while a second person hacked the pump. In this case, it was approximately $54. It's hard to feel too bad for gas stations getting ripped off, since pretty much everyone feels like they're being gouged at the pumps anyway. It's weird that these pumps have Bluetooth though, right? Why does everything have to have some sort of connectivity these days? Why would a gas pump even need Bluetooth? Number 2. He's really sorry. Dean McCulley, a name notorious for preying on vulnerable elderly women, once again found himself on the wrong side of the law. With over 36 previous convictions for scams targeting the elderly, McCulley's latest reign of deception ultimately led to his latest prison sentence. His 2 victims, referred to as Mrs. C and Mrs. N, were elderly Auckland retirees, both living alone and enduring personal hardships. McCulley's scheme involved befriending these women and using guilt and manipulation to swindle money. McCulley had approached 81-year-old Mrs. C, offering to perform household maintenance work. He convinced her that her house needed cleaning, so she agreed to pay him $1,500. But this initial amount only marked the beginning of his sham. He came back later asking for more money, even accompanying her to the ATM to ensure he received an additional $600 to $800. Only after persistent calls and pleas for more money did Mrs. C realize she was being scammed. The second victim, 80-year-old Mrs. N, was no stranger to hardship. Having recently recovered from a severe stroke, she was targeted by McCulley while working in her garden. He claimed he could clean her eaves and roof, and she agreed, handing him $520. Little did she know that this would be the first of many transactions. Over the course of a week, McCulley bombarded Mrs. N with various tales of financial woes, pressing her to lend him more money. In total, he managed to convince her to make 29 transactions totaling $11,900. The victim, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, felt forced into giving him the money. McCulley even went so far as to impersonate his bank manager or landlord during phone calls, further manipulating Mrs. N. When the weight of the scam became apparent, Mrs. N's family intervened, confronting McCulley and alerting the authorities, leading to his arrest. But the damage was done, as Mrs. N had been emotionally and financially drained. The court during his trial considered his extensive criminal history, which included 36 prior convictions for causing financial loss by deception. Despite previous sentences, McCulley clearly hadn't reformed. His consistent reoffending raised concerns about his attitudes, lifestyle, lack of consequential thinking, financial troubles, and an inclination to support criminal behavior. Both victims faced distressing consequences due to McCulley's actions. Mrs. C, who had been widowed for almost 10 years and who also had recently recovered from a severe stroke, had experienced a decline in her mental and emotional well-being. Mrs. N, too, suffered immensely, experiencing a loss of independence, anxiety, and isolation. She believed that her stroke had changed her thought process, leaving her more susceptible to McCulley's manipulations. With a history of relentlessly targeting of elderly women, it seems unlikely that he truly regrets his actions or is committed to rehabilitation. There's always hope that people can change and become a better version than what they are, but the sad reality is that there's just some people who need to be kept away from everyone else. Number 1. The worst best man. Martin Galvin was given the responsibility of arranging trips to Prague and a day at the races for his friend of 18 years, Dino Carter. Galvin took on the trusted role planning Carter's bachelor party, but exploited it for personal gain. He managed to pocket 7,945 pounds from the groom and other members of the party. The money was intended to cover flights and hotel bookings for the upcoming events. However, instead of using the funds for their intended purposes, Galvin used the money on himself to fuel his gambling habit. Galvin claimed that he might have bowel cancer, which led to several hospital visits and excuses to divert attention away from the bachelor party planning. When the group arrived at the airport for their trip to Prague, they discovered that the flights and hotel rooms had never been booked, and the money was nowhere to be found. Not only did Galvin betray the trust placed in him as the best man, but he also took advantage of Carter's empathy by claiming he had terminal cancer. The lie was calculated to point that he reduced his friends to tears. But Galvin's lies didn't end there. He persistently and boldly lied about his health, crafting a believable illusion of a man on the brink of dire death. In court, the judge didn't mince words when he described Galvin's fraud as one of the nastiest and meanest he had ever encountered. The judge was astonished astonished at the audacity of the lie where a best man betrayed not only his friend's trust, but the sanctity of the role. Galvin was ultimately sentenced to 20 months in jail in order to fully pay back the 23 victims he swindled within 1 month. And it was over such a small amount. Don't get us wrong, £7,900 is a good amount of money, but is it worth a jail sentence and the destruction of the relationship with all your closest friends? Hopefully, Galvin figures it out and gets the help he clearly needs. Chelsea soccer player Gail Kakuta put in a request for a high-end car to chauffeur him around town. Kakuta wasn't a big star or anything, but he had a reputation for being free with his money, and since he was making about $37,000 a week, the guy had money to spend. Of course, the company was stoked because an athlete with a reputation for being a bit free with his money is something any company is going to be happy about. So the sales manager, who saw the dollar signs, grabbed a Bentley Continental GT and a chauffeur, then sent the man out to do whatever Kakuta wanted to do. What Kakuta wanted to do was go shopping. And shopping he did. He bought so much stuff, the company actually needed a second car just for his bags. Then Kakuta went to a club where he dropped over $3,000 on bottles of Dom Perignon. The only problem was Gail Kakuta wasn't the man who made the call, nor was he the man being driven around spending all that money. Fraudster Mehdi Abalimba was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As tensions rose in his country, he fled with his family to the UK and settled in London back in the 90s. Besides his country of origin, not much is known about Abalimba's real life. When he joined the soccer scene, Abalimba seemed to have a promising future in sports. Some saw him as a diamond in the rough that had the potential to be a star. At the age of 16, Abalimba went to some tryouts in Liverpool where the club assesses a player's ability and potential to see if they would be a good fit. At 17, he signed a contract with Derby, a second-tier club similar to AAA minor league baseball. And by 19, he joined Oldham Athletic, a Tier 4 team similar to Single A minor league in baseball. So his foot was in the door, but pretty far from the big leagues. When Abalimba's crimes eventually came to light, various people in both clubs either claimed not to remember him or could only vaguely recall his stints with them. One of the odd questions about Abalimba surrounded his actual age. According to the 2011-2012 Sky Sports Football Yearbook, Abalimba was born on October 14th, 1992, but documents from his later criminal convictions said his birthday was actually May 26th, 1989. So, why does that matter? Well, if he were born in 1989, it would mean that he couldn't qualify for several of the clubs that he did tryouts with since they believed he was in his late teens, instead of being a bit older. If you follow sports at all, you know that players coming from developing countries often have questionable birth records. We're looking at you, Albert Pujols. Anyway, Abalimba's former teammate said that he seemed older than the rest of them, which matters because a grown man playing against teenagers is going to play better. Naturally, his teammates were suspicious, and on one occasion, one tried to grab his passport to check his age. Abalimba got pissed. Abalimba's career wasn't the one he dreamed of. Although he had moderate success with a few clubs, he never became a household name. But he knew that with fame would come wealth and respect. If Abalimba couldn't get the status he desired on his own, he would have to find other ways to live a life of luxury. Although Abalimba's career slowed down, his lifestyle did not. According to an article by The Athletic, he desperately wanted the glamorous life of a soccer star, with hefty paychecks, flashy cars, mansions, designer clothing, and chauffeurs. In his mind, professional athletes got to skip the lines at clubs and head straight to the VIP area, always had beautiful women at their sides, and had access to exclusive nightclubs and hotels. So if he didn't have the athletic ability to build this life on his own, he would have to find another way, and that's exactly what he did. Abalimba was at a tryout for a club in Scotland when he met Mikhail Antoine Courier. The two clicked instantly and became good friends. Players thought highly of Abalimba, and at the time, everyone seemed to like him. Antoine Courier let Abalimba move into his apartment when he needed a place to live. Then, one morning, Abalimba said he wasn't going to go to training, which at the time didn't concern Antoine Courier. Then, Abalimba's roommate received a call from his bank to discuss irregular purchases made with his account. Someone had used his information to buy designer clothes, hotels, flights, and other stuff. The shopping spree came to $17,500. Antoine Courier didn't initially suspect Abalimba until he realized his credit card was missing. The police showed him security camera footage of the fraudster making purchases using the missing card, confirming that Abalimba had stolen his identity. Before the police could catch him, Abalimba fled to another part of the country and took on a new identity: professional soccer player Gael Kakuta. When a taxi company received a call requesting a top-end vehicle for Chelsea soccer player Gael Kakuta, they were happy to assist. Kakuta joined Chelsea as one of the most promising young prospects in Europe 7 years earlier, but hadn't lived up to his reputation since he became a member of the club. Still, he had a good reputation and a contract that was reportedly worth $37,200 a week. The taxi company's sales manager booked a Bentley Continental GT for the player and instructed the chauffeur to take him wherever he wanted to go. But the chauffeur didn't realize when he picked up Kakuta that it was actually Abalimba who got in the car posing as the Chelsea player. Having been instructed to cater to Abalimba's every need, the driver drove him to a mall where he indulged in an extravagant shopping trip. Abalimba bought so much stuff that they needed a second vehicle to handle the overflow items. Next, they visited a nightclub where the scammer bought $3,250 worth of champagne. Over the next few weeks, the chauffeur took his client to stay in some of London's finest and most expensive hotels, where Kakuta racked up $12,000 in bills. He also treated 4 girls to a $1,300 helicopter ride over London and then took them to a mansion outside the city. Although he rented it for $1,000 a night, the women thought it was his. Since everyone around him thought Abalimba was a wealthy athlete, they were willing to make allowances for things like his needing to borrow credit card details for purchases or promising to settle accounts later. Nobody doubted that Kakuta had the money to pay them back. Problem was that they had no idea that Abalimba was masquerading as Kakuta and committing fraud in his name. While impersonating Kakuta, Abalimba had changed soccer clubs several times but played at a much lower level than his alias. Rather than pulling in Kakuta's $37,000 a week, Abalimba only made $373 a week. He was so strapped for cash that he also worked part-time in the office of a minicab company to make ends meet. At some point, Abalimba realized that he physically resembled Kakuta enough to pull off the con and live the life he dreamed of. At least for a while. In July 2014, pretending to be Kakuta, Abalimba went shopping in Manchester, England. He went to a department store where a personal shopper helped him pick out $25,000 worth of clothing and jewelry. When he reached the checkout, he handed over a damaged credit card which didn't work. He promised to figure out the issue and come back for the items the next day. The following day, the chauffeur returned to the store to pick up the goods, but a store detective refused to hand them over and contacted the police. Abalimba left a pattern of fraudulent behavior across the UK in his midst, from stealing from Antoine Courier to his days of impersonating Kakuta. As Kakuta, Abalimba conned a woman into covering a $5,784 spa bill and a $3,000 taxi bill. He said he didn't have his cards on him at the time, and with his status, the woman believed he would pay her back. And this wasn't the first time he was on the police's radar. In 2013, Abalimba skipped out on a $32,000 bill at a nightclub and received a suspended 6-month sentence and was ordered to perform 150 hours of community service. Anyway, law enforcement tracked Abalimba down in 2014 at his Berkshire mansion, where he was surrounded by bags of designer goods. They arrested him and charged him with multiple charges of fraud. Months later, Abalimba pleaded guilty to 12 charges, defrauding various people out of $200,000, and the judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison. There were many contradicting reports about who Abalimba was and how people saw him. Some teammates said he had a big personality and was incredibly charming. That was until they were at a restaurant or bar and the bill appeared, saying he'd pay back whomever picked up the check right now. The teammates trusted him. He was well connected and knew how to get his friends into exclusive nightclubs. Of course, he wasn't paying anything back. One teammate said that Abalimba was a good prospect and strong player, but another claimed he was never at Premier League level, Premier League being the highest level in soccer. Even when he was in jail, Abalimba couldn't stop himself from charming and scamming a 50-year-old prison nurse. She smuggled a cell phone into the prison for him, and when her employer found out what she did, she was arrested and sentenced to 20 months in jail for misconduct in public office. Abalimba left prison in 2017 and focused on finding a new soccer club. He headed back to Derbyshire to play in the Northern Premier League, the 7th tier of English soccer. Abalimba's time on the team was volatile. 14 minutes into his debut, the referee benched him for getting too aggressive with an opponent. A similar incident happened during his second appearance. From there, he didn't play many games, but still earned 2 red cards, meaning he was sent off the field and prohibited from playing for the rest of the matches, and he only scored 1 goal. In early 2019, reality TV star Georgia Steele met Miguel Johnson. Johnson was an Atlanta native with a famous mother whose identity he couldn't disclose, and she was a TV personality who fell in love with Johnson. After 2 months of dating, paparazzi snapped pictures of the two together. The Sun newspaper printed the images and asked the public to identify Steele's new mystery man. Someone contacted the newspaper and identified Miguel Johnson as Abalimba, a notorious fraudster. Although Steele was shocked, Abalimba claimed he told her everything and said that the two were great and that Steele felt bad for how her man was being judged. But 24 hours after Steele learned of Johnson's true identity, she discovered $17,000 was missing from her account. Although Abalimba denied his involvement in the situation, she cut off all ties with him. By the time Abalimba was arrested for conning Steele, he had begun a relationship with Claire Mary, the ex-wife of another soccer player. Although he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 23 months in prison, he hid his stint behind bars from Mary. Instead, he told her he was in Kuwait on military service and would be home soon. They spoke on the phone every day, and if she heard a noise in the background, she assumed it was to do with a military operation. Abalimba left prison in March 2020 and met up with Mary, who thought he'd returned from Kuwait. Then, she discovered multiple unauthorized transactions someone had made using her debit card, totaling $63,000. Another alias that Abalimba used was that of NFL running back Tariq Cohen. The owner of a chauffeur and concierge company, Mark Bilton, got a call from someone claiming to be Gustavo, a representative of the Chicago Bears running back. Gustavo requested that Bilton look after his client during Cohen's stay in London, and Bilton agreed to go the extra mile to please the high-end client. In return, Gustavo promised Bilton gifts and an introduction to Elton John. He said that Diana Ross was his godmother and that he would make sure that, moving forward, she would only do business with Bilton's company when she came to London. Bilton arranged for Cohen to travel in his best cars and committed to ensuring that the so-called football player had an unforgettable trip to the UK. But there was always a reason why Cohen couldn't pay his luxury hotel bills. Bilton offered to cover them on Cohen's behalf, with the trust that he would be paid back. As the bills added up, and it wasn't long before Bilton was out of tens of thousands of pounds. Worrying he wouldn't get his money back, he contacted Gustavo and agreed to meet to discuss the situation. Gustavo arrived in a Rolls Royce and took Bilton to one of the city's up-and-coming neighborhoods to show the businessman the 3 apartments that Gustavo planned on buying. Despite covering over $113,000 in hotel bills so far, he tried not to worry about repayment, as it seemed like a cash flow issue more than anything. Unfortunately, Bilton never got his money back. Abalimba just couldn't stop himself from scamming pretty much everyone he met. Forensic psychologist Dr. Donna Young said in an interview for The Footballer Fraudster, a documentary about Abalimba's crimes, that his case was one of the most extreme she had ever seen. Dr. Young said Abalimba liked to play on people's respect for his status and wealth and didn't demand payment because they trusted him. Since he was famous, they didn't mind making allowances they wouldn't normally make to keep him happy. Dr. Young also said that his ability to take on different identities and turn into other people was because Abalimba couldn't separate himself from the characters he was playing. In his mind, he actually was Gail Kakuta, Miguel Johnson, and Tariq Cohen. In 2021, Abalimba was arrested again and charged with 15 counts of fraud. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months in prison. He left prison in 2023. Abalimba's life of crime has been made into a documentary called The Footballer Fraudster by ITVX in the UK. What are a few of the worst crimes done by the most despicable criminals? Let's find out, starting with number 6, cash for visas. Mohammed Babar Bashir from Manchester, England, got caught orchestrating an illegal immigration scheme involving fake colleges. Cue up the movie Accepted. We know like 5 of you have seen it, but it was decent. Bashir was seen posing on a bed with over 65,000 pounds just before he got caught, but not in a hot way. More like an awkward, "Oh, I'm on this bed with some money. This is so candid. Wow, look at all the money though." Anyway, alongside co-conspirators Tashina Nair and Kadaswara Nalamathu, Bashir operated sham educational institutions including St. John College in Ashton and Kinnaird College in Stevenson Square, Manchester city centre. Despite lacking basic educational resources such as books, equipment, or qualified teachers, these colleges managed to deceive approximately 1,300 individuals aspiring to study in the UK. The operation centered around a cash for visas scam where people paid cash to Bashir and Nayar in exchange for a golden ticket, a confirmation of acceptance of study known as the CAS letter, allowing them to get a student visa. Legitimate students entering the UK typically paid a nominal fee of £14 for CAS, covering an administration fee to the Home Office. But Nalamathu advertised the fraudulent CAS service with or without English proficiency for £500 through his phone. The colleges involved in the scam, St. John College and Kinnaird College, managed to make about £3 million over a 2-year period. The Home Office shut down both colleges when they found out about the fraud. In total, 955 students secured a CAS letter through St. John College, and 352 individuals got it through Kinnaird College. During the trial, Bashir and Nalamathu were found guilty of conspiracy to facilitate breaches of UK immigration law. But Bashir failed to appear at the sentencing hearing, leading to a warrant being issued for his arrest. And why do people pose with money so often? Why is that a thing? Flexing has no upside except when it's to run a scam. Number 5. Dr. Baby Daddies. An Idaho woman, Sharon Hayes, has filed a lawsuit against her former fertility doctor, Dr. David R. Claypool, accusing him of secretly using his own, he's a fertility doctor, so guess what he used? To impregnate her back in 1989. We'll call them mermaids. According to the lawsuit filed in Spokane County Superior Court, Hayes sought fertility treatment from Dr. Claypool in 1989 after she and her then husband struggled with infertility. Sharon specifically requested an anonymous donor, and Claypool assured her that the donor would be selected based on specific traits she chose, such as hair and eye color, and would be screened for health or genetic issues. The lawsuit alleges that Claypool charged $100 cash for each treatment, claiming the money was for college or medical students who donated their mermaids. Last year, Hayes' daughter, Brianna Hayes, discovered the truth. Brianna found out who her biological father was after submitting her DNA to 23andMe and was shocked to find out that her dad was actually her mom's fertility doctor. And Dr. Claypool wasn't only her biological father, but she also learned that she had at least 16 half-siblings in the area. Of course, everyone flipped. Cases of fertility fraud have gained attention in recent years due to the proliferation of online DNA services. The lawsuit against Claypool includes serious allegations of fraud, failure to obtain consent in violation of state medical malpractice law, and violation of state consumer protection law. These allegations stem from Claypool's scheme of charging cash for his own mermaids while falsely representing it as a donor's mermaids. Despite Claypool's claims of innocence, which are pretty flimsy claims considering he's arguing DNA results, the case highlights the pressing need for ethical guidelines and regulations in the fertility industry. And really, what kind of egomaniac nutbar does this? It's not like he needed the money, he's a doctor. There's some real sick issues here. Number 4. Buy more gift cards. Tracy Jones, a resident of Northern California, became the victim of a sophisticated phone scam just hours before she was scheduled for a major surgery. She was already stressed out about the surgery, but she knew that she wouldn't have the energy or be in the right state of mind to take care of everyday life things after her surgery. So, Tracy decided to tackle one last time-sensitive task on her to-do list. It ended up being the worst day of her life. Her ordeal began when she attempted to return some damaged grilling grilling basket she had purchased online. Searching for Etsy customer service on Google, she called the first number that appeared, thinking it was a real customer service line for the online marketplace. On the call, a person posing as an Etsy customer service agent convinced Jones that her account had been hacked. He said that someone was trying to use her account to buy an iPhone and iPads. The man told Tracy to download AnyDesk, an app that would let him take control of her phone. You can probably guess why this is a bad idea. Under the scammer's guidance, Tracy was persuaded into purchasing nearly $5,000 worth of Apple and Target gift cards in person from various stores, including Lowe's, Target, and Raley's grocery stores. Having her drain her bank account would apparently block the hackers from getting to her money. The scammer said he would then deposit the money back into her bank account. He then had Tracy scratch off the card numbers and send him the pictures. Despite growing suspicious, Jones followed the scammer's instructions because she wasn't sure what was going on and, of course, a little freaked out. Right before Tracy was to go under for surgery, she got yet another text from the scammer saying there was a problem. She needed to buy more cards because it wasn't blocking the hackers. By now, you guys already know what happened. Unfortunately, when she later checked her bank account, she discovered that all her money was gone. The scammer used a malicious app that Jones unknowingly downloaded to take control of her phone, allowing him to orchestrate the entire scam. Although the fake number no longer appears in Google search results, this type of scam still, of course, exists, with scammers constantly adapting and changing their tactics. Please let your less than tech-savvy loved ones know to never download anything that lets someone else take control of your phone or computer. Scams like this are becoming more and more common. Number 3. Double whammy. A Brisbane woman who's only going by the name Nikki found herself in a devastating situation after falling victim to an elaborate employment scam. Nikki, who had become her husband's full-time carer due to his severe medical conditions, was desperately seeking a work-from-home job to support her family. She got a message on LinkedIn from a man named Alvis who claimed to represent a high-profile marketing company called Dune 7. Alvis offered Nikki a job opportunity to boost sales for travel companies, promising significant commissions. At first, Nikki was overjoyed by the prospect of finding employment that allowed her to work remotely. However, the situation quickly took a dark turn. Alvis, communicating through WhatsApp and later Telegram, convinced Nikki to complete tasks called expedited journeys. To participate in these journeys, Nikki had to invest her own money with the promise of substantial returns on commissions. Alvis hit her with the "old spend money to make money" bit, common phrase people use to describe necessary spending for business opportunities. Nikki went along with putting in her own money, thinking it was an investment for her future earnings. As she continued to invest, Alvis kept pressuring her to complete more tasks, leading her to drain her entire savings account and take out a $6,000 bank loan. The scammer's tactics became increasingly manipulative, even showing romantic interest in Nikki to keep her engaged. When Nikki refused to invest another $10,000, the scammer's true intentions became evident. Realizing she'd been scammed, Nikki was totally defeated. She confided in her sister, who helped her set up a GoFundMe campaign to seek financial assistance. Scammers take advantage of vulnerable individuals seeking employment, often resort to elaborate tactics to deceive their victims. Authorities and platforms like LinkedIn continue to emphasize the importance of being aware that scams exist when searching for jobs online. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has witnessed a significant rise in job scams in recent years, especially targeting people seeking work-from-home opportunities. They advise job seekers to research prospective employers thoroughly, verify the legitimacy of job offers, and report suspicious activities. Stay alert, protect personal information, and remain cautious when dealing with job opportunities online. Number 2. Selling stolen cars. In her desperate pursuit of finding a reliable vehicle, single mom Ashley McCowan fell victim to a heart-wrenching scam, leaving her family in a dire situation. After meticulously saving for months to purchase a car, McCowan stumbled upon a seemingly affordable 1997 light green Honda Civic priced at $800 on Facebook Marketplace. Eager to finally have some reliable transportation, she contacted the seller, Andrew Arbino. Upon receiving the car title from Arbino, McCowan immediately got the feeling that something was up. The title was written on and names were crossed out, and it looked like there was a forged signature of a deceased person's name and other manipulated information. Ashley figured she had been tricked, so she went to Arbino, begging him to give her back her money and she would return the car. She shared the emotional struggle of saving up the money, pleading for a refund to continue her search for a vehicle. But Arbino never responded. Undeterred, Ashley took matters into her own hands and reported the incident to the authorities, seeking justice for herself and potential future victims. Law enforcement officers investigated her case, leading to the discovery that the car Arbino sold her had previously belonged to an individual who tragically ended their life. Prosecutor Sarah McMahon from the Clinton County Chief Prosecutor's Office said she was pretty sure that Arbino deliberately sold McCowan a stolen vehicle. The legal system swiftly took action, taking the car from McCowan and starting an investigation into Arbino. Sadly, during that investigation, McCowan's financial stability completely crumbled. With no income and no vehicle, she faced overwhelming despair and hopelessness. McCowan said she received tons of messages from other people who claimed to be victims of Arbino's scams, which might make her feel a little better knowing she wasn't the only one. Scammers really don't care how broke or poor someone is. They'll rip off anyone for any amount of money. We've heard about some scammers being victims themselves, forced to run scams by someone else, and we've heard about scammers believing that they're not really doing any harm because everyone in the US is insured, so it's no big deal. These seem like they can be possible explanations for what these people do, but Arbino isn't any of those people and was fully aware of what he was doing. So the takeaway here is that you can never really let your guard down, and probably don't make big purchases off of Facebook Marketplace. Number 1. Golden Ponzi. Wantani Tibaveth, also known as May Manny, was stopped by Thai police for allegedly scamming nearly 3,000 people out of $28.3 million. Tibaveth was accused of orchestrating a Ponzi scheme that promised investors an impressive 93% profit. She had set up a fake gold shop in Udon Thani in northern Thailand to create an illusion of wealth and lure in potential victims. Tibaveth and her boyfriend, Meti Chinpa, faced charges related to fraud and financial crimes. The victims of the scheme were told that they were investing in films and cosmetics, with most initially investing 1,000 baht, which is only roughly $30 US, but some individuals ended up investing millions of baht. 1 million baht is around $27,000. The devastating consequences of the scam led some victims to take their own lives after losing substantial sums of money. To attract victims, Tipaveth utilized social media platforms, showing off her fake wealth with photos of gold jewelry and celebrities in luxurious settings. Her online presence, coupled with false promises of significant returns, successfully lured unsuspecting individuals into her scheme. As it turns out, her shop wasn't much more than a countertop in the corner of some office somewhere, where she had taken pictures with what was most likely fake jewelry. Despite the freezing of her assets by Thai authorities, Tipaveth taunted law enforcement on social media, claiming she could always find more money, and it always works out when you taunt law enforcement, right? In response to Tipaveth's scam, victims of a similar Ponzi scheme called Forex 3D protested outside the Department of Special Investigation headquarters in Bangkok. Tipaveth's case is just another in the growing line of investment scams in Thailand, prompting victims of other schemes to demand action from the authorities. Tipaveth and her boyfriend faced accusations of defrauding 2,500 people based on false promises of extraordinarily high returns of up to 93% per month, resulting in damages totaling 1.3 billion baht, or $28.3 million. Tipaveth said characteristically dumb things when confronted about the possibility of jail time, and claimed she was actually a victim. In spite of her bold statements, the court sentenced her and her boyfriend to the maximum jail term of 20 years anyway, taking into account their confessions, and ordered them to compensate the victims. What are some of the most common but scariest scams that happen a lot? Let's find out, starting with number 6, Peggy Fulford. Peggy Ann Fulford, someone we've covered before, is a woman who's been convicted of defrauding several professional athletes, such as ex-NBA player Dennis Rodman and ex-NFL player Ricky Williams. She was released early from her 10-year prison sentence. Fulford, who posed as a financial advisor, served part of her sentence at a low-security federal prison in Alabama before being released to a halfway home program in Orlando, Florida. Fulford's activities targeted a variety of professional athletes, including Travis Best and Lex Hilliard. She claimed to have studied law and business at Harvard, bragging about her success on Wall Street through lucrative hospital deals and real estate investments in the Bahamas. Despite media reports revealing her educational background in engineering from Georgia Tech, Fulford convinced her victims that she was a trustworthy financial professional. The scheme involved promising to pay her victims' bills, file taxes, and make retirement investments on their behalf without any charges. In reality, Fulford gained access to their bank accounts over 14 years, embezzling money to fund her own lavish lifestyle, including purchases of cars, jewelry, airline tickets, and land. Fulford was arrested and pleaded guilty to one federal charge of interstate transportation of stolen property. She received the maximum sentence of 10 years behind bars and was ordered to pay over $5.7 million in restitution to her victims. Fulford's criminal activities extended beyond defrauding athletes. She also pleaded guilty to a Louisiana state charge of stealing $174,000 from a physician, falsely claiming they would jointly buy and redevelop a historic, vacant New Orleans schoolhouse. She received an additional 3-year prison sentence for this scheme to be served concurrently. Because of her high-profile victims, Fulford's case drew attention, and she was featured on CNBC's American Greed and BET's American Gangster, Trap Queens. Perhaps one of the more surprising parts of Fulford's story is the forgiveness extended to her by Ricky Williams. Right after, Williams' wife said Fulford literally took all of the money he earned in 11 NFL seasons. Williams said he realized that it's an unexpected attitude and that he may be delusional, but remarked that Fulford brought both good and bad into his life and expressed a desire to be on what he affectionately referred to as the Peggy train, which is honestly a refreshing attitude, if not the very least interesting. It's still sad that he rode the Peggy train to bankruptcy town. Be careful who you're trusting with your money. It's like the GPS in your car. It'll tell you how to get where you're going, but you can't let it drive for you, or you'll end up in a lake. Number 5. Stranger danger. A family in San Jose, California fell victim to a con resulting in the theft of over $100,000 worth of jewelry. Renuka Rajagopal and her husband Raj Pokalori became targets when 4 people, including one carrying a toddler, knocked on their door, claiming to be interested in purchasing a dress from Renuka, a popular Indian fashion designer known for her exclusive online appointments. But Renuka let the strangers in, a decision she later regretted. A distraction tactic unfolded as 3 women started asking Renuka a bunch of questions with the baby constantly crying, while 2 others carrying sling bags snuck in. Renuka admitted that it was kind of dumb to let the people in, but she was running a business from her house and a sale is a sale. Surveillance footage from the home shows the thieves making a quick exit, having stolen jewelry valued at over $100,000. It took the family several days to realize the extent of the theft, and eventually they reported the incident to the police. The couple connected the dots when they saw a news report detailing a similar home invasion robbery involving an elderly couple who fell victim to the same distraction tactics. In that case, 3 women distracted the couple while stealing a family safe. The couple said they were pretty sure that the same suspects are responsible for both incidents. The San Jose Police Department's Robbery Unit and Financial Crimes Unit are actively investigating the incidents, suspecting a potential link to a 3rd case with similar characteristics. So it's understandable why Renuka would let these people into her home, considering she's trying to make money. She's running a business, and if you've ever run a business, you know how difficult it is, so turning down a potential sale isn't a good idea. But when you're running a business from your home, or even if you're not, it's never a good idea to just let strangers in your house, no matter how nice they seem. Number 4. The Dog Menace. Sean Dorr, a food delivery driver, faced a roughly 4,800-pound fine after attempting to deceive homeowners by claiming he was bitten by their friendly pet Labrador, Marley. Dorr alleged that Marley had not only damaged his car, but also caused injury to his arm. Dorr presented Marley's owners with a quote of £185 for car scratch repairs and initiated a claim for injury compensation seeking up to £3,000. But he was exposed when CCTV footage revealed a completely different scenario. Instead of a hostile encounter, the video captured Marley enthusiastically greeting Dorr with a wagging tail as he delivered a takeaway. Suspicions arose when the homeowner's insurance provider, AXA, reviewed the footage and found no evidence of the supposed hostile encounter. Medical examinations further disproved Dorr's claims of deep scratches inflicted by Marley. But Dorr was committed and tried to say the video evidence had been manipulated, a defense that didn't hold up in court. The court outright dismissed the claim, and as As a consequence, Dorr was ordered to pay the legal costs of Marley's owners, totaling roughly £4,800. The law firm Clyde & Company, acting on behalf of AXA, conducted the investigation into Dorr's fraudulent claim. Damian Rourke, a partner at Clyde & Company, pointed out the importance of surveillance technologies in exposing dishonest insurance claims. Dorr's inconsistencies, such as vanishing puncture marks, failure to seek medical attention, and a false claim of contacting the NHS 111 phone number, which is a non-emergency medical advice number in the UK, further contributed to the dismissal of his case. We're glad this guy got exposed, as we typically are for scammers who get caught. But no doubt, Marley is a good boy, and we all know what happens when dog bites are reported, which is all the more tragic. So this story has a happy ending, but because this guy wanted some cash, he was about to cost a good boy his life, which is just that much worse. Number 3. Booking.scam. People are facing a new scam employing sophisticated tactics to trick unsuspecting travelers into revealing sensitive information. People have been getting fraudulent emails, supposedly from Booking.com's email address, threatening to cancel their hotel reservations unless they confirm their payment details within 12 hours. The emails, which mimicked Booking.com's official communications, created a sense of urgency and pressured users to provide their bank card details. Some users have fallen victim to the scam, losing pretty large amounts of money, and the scam didn't stop with just emails. Scam notifications have also appeared on the Booking.com mobile app. One victim, a TikTok user named Nandini, shared her experience of being scammed out of £200. She got a message through the Booking.com app telling her to click a link to confirm her reservation. The fake message closely resembled the legitimate Booking.com interface, and the request for a card is pretty common when booking hotels, but it was a scam. Another user almost fell victim to a similar scam involving £2,000. Laura, who works in the tech industry, emphasized the cleverness of the approach, catching her off guard despite her familiarity with tech-related scams. Luckily, she delayed payment, finding the 12-hour notice odd, but was shocked at how slick this scam was. In response, Booking.com explained that some accommodation partners have been targeted by convincing and sophisticated phishing tactics. The scammers use these tactics to trick partners into clicking on malicious links or downloading harmful attachments, leading to unauthorized access to Booking.com accounts. The company assured users that it's not a breach of its back-end systems, but a coordinated effort by the scammers, which is a very corporate way of saying that it's an isolated incident and they're not at fault. Even though it's not isolated, and if they're being hacked, then they do need to do something about it. The scary part of this scam is the fact that it went through Booking.com's mobile app, which feels like it should be trustworthy. Your best bet would be simply call the hotel if you get one of these messages and talk to the front desk directly. Scammers are getting more and more sophisticated, so double check everything. Number 2. The wire transfer. An Australian couple faced a legal battle of over $139,000 loss in a sophisticated scam involving the purchase of a Mercedes-Benz. Wendy Anglis and Derek Thompson fell victim to hackers who manipulated emailed invoices, altering the bank account number on a PDF sent by what they thought was the Mercedes-Benz dealership. The couple transferred $40,000 3 times and $19,000 once to the phony account. In response, Wendy and Derek filed legal action against Mercedes-Benz, alleging a breach of Australian consumer law. They argued that had they known the initial transfer was to an incorrect account, they would have taken steps to recover the payment. The couple said there was no way of distinguishing the manipulated invoice from a legitimate one. However, Mercedes-Benz launched a counterclaim, saying that the couple breached the purchase contract by not completing the transaction. The luxury car dealer demanded the payment of the scammed $139,000 and the surrender of a trade-in vehicle worth $17,292.47, part of the original deal. Mercedes-Benz acknowledges receiving 4 emails from the couple about the transfers, but didn't notify them of the issue until a week later. The car maker contends that it doesn't owe a duty of care to the couple and suggested that Wendy contributed to the problem by lacking adequate IT or password security. So what do you think? Who's at fault? The victims who fell prey to the fraudulent invoice, or the luxury car dealer whose systems were allegedly compromised? What's the right thing to do here? The couple is out a massive amount of money, and the dealership isn't just giving high-end luxury cars away for free. Tell us what you think in the comments below. Number 1. Big Bar Tabs. An Australian businessman named Puneet Singh Sodhi found himself in a financial nightmare after a work trip to Vietnam took an unsuspected turn. Sodi, attempting to jumpstart his consultancy business in Ho Chi Minh City, got a bill of $43,000 for drinks while out with a client. The charges occurred over 3 nights at 2 bars, Bottoms Up and Double Shots. Bar names are so clever, aren't they? It's like if you own a bar or a salon, you have to have some weird punny name. Anyway, the receipt showed purchases totaling roughly $20,000 at Bottoms Up and $25,000 at Double Shots for things like hookah, wine, and Red Bull. But the amount of items Sodi supposedly ordered seemed very unlikely, because even if he had consumed a fraction of the list of drinks, it would have been life-threatening. If you've ever had more than 3 Red Bulls in a day, you know what he's saying is true. Sodi immediately contacted American Express to dispute the bill, questioning why his card wasn't frozen during such suspicious transactions. He argued that scammers likely got his information during instances where bar staff took his credit card into a back room to process the bill. To make matters worse, the signed receipts presented to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority were deemed illegible scribbles bearing no resemblance to Sodi's actual signature. American Express defended its decision not to cancel the card, saying that a large value transaction alone doesn't necessarily signal fraud. They also said the transactions appeared legitimate, and this, coupled with Vietnam's uncommon practice of using PIN codes for validation, led to the oversight. Ultimately, Sodi successfully appealed the $43,000 bill, reducing the amount he owed to $3,300. Despite the financial setback, he expressed his intention to continue using American Express, pointing out his loyalty and the company's assistance during the dispute. Targeting travelers in various countries where unsuspecting tourists, often drunk, fall victim to scams is becoming increasingly common. And such incidents aren't limited to exotic destinations either. Even in familiar settings like clubs in Las Vegas, travelers can easily find themselves facing unexpected and unauthorized charges. And it's scary because it's not like Sodi did anything outright stupid. He opened a tab and paid his bills like he's supposed to, and he got scammed. It's not always feasible to go wherever your card goes at all times, but Sodi was smart for sticking with using his credit card instead of his actual bank card, since credit cards do offer more protection in these situations, and he was able to dispute it. Or do you think he was just putting up a big fight so he didn't get in trouble with his wife? What kind of bars were they anyway? Sounds like someone may have been up to some mischief. What are the scariest crimes you need to watch out for? Let's find out, starting with number 6. Gavin Malouf, scammed by gold digger. Actress Jennifer Courtemanche plotted to date wealthy businessman Gavin Malouf so she could drain his bank account. Texts between Courtemanche and her friend Brittany Burgess revealed her intention to steal from the Vegas NHL tycoon. Courtemanche texted Burgess to tell her that Malouf had invited her to meet up with him after breaking up with his ex-girlfriend. The actress told her friend that she wasn't going to let anything stop her from making a romantic connection with Malouf. The friends believed the relationship was their opportunity to get rich and stop worrying about money. Malouf is a part owner of the Vegas Golden Knights hockey team, and his famous family made multiple reality TV appearances, including his sister, Adrienne Malouf, who starred on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. The businessman received a string of threatening messages and photographs, prompting him to file a report with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, who traced the number to Courtemanche. With the help of the Los Angeles Police Department, law enforcement showed up at Courtemanche's home with a search warrant. They seized her electronic devices, where they uncovered her scam. Courtemanche had gained access to Malouf's cell phone and moved money from his account to hers. She transferred $94,000 in 2021, $276,000 in 2022, and $75,600 in 2023. Courtemanche and Burgess made a total of 214 transactions, 144 of which were from a number belonging to Burgess, who sent the money back to Courtemanche. Burgess received $12,000 through the scheme, whereas Courtemanche made $433,000 and used 37 different phone numbers throughout the scheme. The women were named co-defendants in a criminal complaint filed in Las Vegas Justice Court. They faced a total of 6 charges, including 3 counts of felony theft. The judge set Cordemancha's bail at $10,000 and allowed her to leave custody, but ordered that she stay away from Maloof. Everyone wants to be rich and famous, but it seems like that life is very lonely. You're kept away from everyone else so you're not constantly harassed by people who want something. You can't really trust any new relationships, and you can't really even trust old relationships coming back to haunt you. Number 5. Collectible records. 4 British men made and sold tens of thousands of niche counterfeit vinyl records. Stephen Russell, Christopher Price, Alan Godfrey, and Robert Pye were part of a group that distributed the unlicensed recordings. They eventually caught the attention of the British phonographic industry, known as the BPI, which represents major record companies in the UK like Sony Music Entertainment, Universal Music Group, and Warner Music. The BPI was test purchasing vinyl records online when it noticed that many had defects, like typos and blurred typefaces. A significant amount also had promotional copy not for sale and DJ copy written on them, which can often make collectible items more valuable when they're authentic. Some records included different artists on alternative sides of the recordings, sharp edges, and center punches on the cover, which made it difficult to read the track titles. The group's inventory included unofficial recordings of many best-selling artists, such as a rare recording of Marvin Gaye's This Love Starved Heart of Mine, which apparently is awesome if you're a Marvin Gaye fan. Price and Russell manufactured and sold the recordings, while Pye and Godfrey handled the commercial sales of the products. Following the BPI's investigation, the police seized 55,000 unlicensed records from the group's inventory. During their trial, the prosecution argued that they had committed copyright and trademark infringement, which they had, and they also left a clear paper trail that made it easy to prove their guilt. Godfrey received $123,000 in transfers from Pye and transferred an additional $95,000 from his PayPal account into his HSBC bank account. Godfrey also had a NatWest account where he had PayPal transfers of $184,401 and Amazon credits worth $13,284. Although Godfrey, Pye, and Price registered with the Performing Rights Society, they didn't have licenses for most of the music they manufactured and sold. The crew received prison sentences ranging from 10 months to 8 months. It's always a best practice to remember that counterfeiters will counterfeit anything and everything. Always thoroughly check your items out for authenticity before signing off on a purchase. Number 4. The Cruel Cold Scam. 76-year-old Jennifer Dennis lost $70,000 to a scammer who convinced her they would spend the rest of their lives together. It started when Jennifer met a man named Caleb on Facebook, where he posed as a Red Cross doctor that was working in Yemen. Jennifer was excited to have somebody to share her day with, and Caleb seemed like a doting partner. Although she admitted she wasn't great with computers, their romance grew quickly, with Jennifer telling him that he made her dreams come true. Jennifer had lost her husband of 33 years and said it was heartbreaking to be in the home they shared together, and Caleb wanted to move to a new area as he recently lost his wife as well. So the pair had made plans to relocate. They planned to buy a house together in North Carolina, which they would move into when Caleb returned to the US. They made a deal that he would put $600,000 toward the property and Jennifer would cover another $70,000. Jennifer's son Raymond helped her sell her home and traveled with her to North Carolina, where she expected to finally meet Caleb in person. But when they got there, they discovered that the home she just put her down payment on was never listed. Panicked, Jennifer contacted Caleb. He said that he had been badly hurt and could barely even type. It was the last time she heard from him. Having lost her life savings and sold her home, Jennifer was forced to sleep in her car. She repeatedly messaged Caleb to tell him how dire her situation was and ask him why he abandoned her, but never received a response. A local church gave her a camper to live in, and she put up a GoFundMe account with the hopes of getting some of the money back. Jennifer also contacted the FBI, but since these cases are notoriously difficult to track, she has little hope that she'll recover the stolen funds. We've probably done a million of these types of romance scams, but it still never stops shocking us how these scammers can just destroy lives like it's nothing. Number 3. The dubious airline supplier. AOG Technics allegedly sold bogus jet engine parts to multiple major aircraft companies, including Delta and United. The company supplied parts for at least 126 commercial planes, but were backed up by forged paperwork. A lawsuit filed against AOG Technics accused the organization of engaging in many suspicious business practices, such as creating a fake online presence. LinkedIn profiles for staff members used a bunch of weird and common stock images from other websites and materials for other businesses. The LinkedIn profile for Ray Kwong, the company's chief commercial officer, featured a photo of a gray-haired man whose image also appeared on other pages, including one for a factory owner named Wang. The profile of Martina Spencer, an account manager for AOG Technics, used an image from an Amazon listing for women's reading glasses. According to business filings, the company's first official address was in a small town in southern England. It moved location several times before settling in the Nova Building, a luxury office building located near Buckingham Palace in central London. But in reality, AOG Technics never had an office in the Nova Building. In fact, its only physical location was a mailing address it rented for $150 per month. CFM, the company that produces the world's best-selling jet engine, frequently used parts from AOG Technics in its engines. Alarms began to sound when European airline TAP Air Portugal's maintenance department reported that the documentation for a small part it acquired from AOG Technics was incorrect. They examined the birth certificate associated with the aerospace part, as is compulsory in the industry, and discovered that it contained a false signature. The airline discovered an additional 24 forms from AOG Technics that had similar issues. Although the products that AOG Technics sold weren't counterfeit, it provided false documents for thousands of parts. Developers of aircraft parts must follow strict regulations and obtain separate approval to produce them, but there isn't a formal process for setting up warehouses to distribute them. While it's unclear how AOG Technics acquired the parts as a result of the scandal, airlines grounded dozens of aircrafts to perform urgent maintenance. According to business filings, AOG Technics had $3 million in assets in 2022, showing the scale of the operation. As of the release of this video, the investigation is still ongoing. Rather than go to the trouble of deceiving some of the biggest aerospace countries in the world, maybe they should have dedicated their resources to just starting a real company and making more money in the long term. Number 2. Grandma Mule. Canadian grandmother Susanna Thayer spent 270 days in a Hong Kong prison after her online boyfriend tricked her into smuggling nose beers inside her suitcase. 5 years after losing her husband, Thayer decided she was ready to find love again. She created an online profile and quickly fell for a man who gave her the attention she had missed since becoming a widow. However, Thayer's new love was a scammer, and over a few months, he swindled her out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Thayer decided to write a book about the entire ordeal, but midway through writing her story, she matched with another man online. At first, the new man seemed different and never asked her to send him anything. He wanted to meet her in person and actually bought her a ticket to see him in Ethiopia and surprised her with a flight to Hong Kong. But when Thayer arrived, the new beau was a no-show for 3 weeks. A few hours before her flight, 2 men visited her with a suitcase filled with dresses, a gift from her boyfriend. Less than 24 hours later, Hong Kong customs officers arrested the grandmother when they discovered that the 262 buttons on the dresses were filled with nose beers. Thayer had no idea. The case against Thayer was very strong, so authorities denied her bail. Since it was rare for the Hong Kong government to drop these type of charges, Thayer faced a life sentence if she was convicted. She also found out that her case was unlikely to go to trial for another 2 years, during which time her only communication with her family in Canada would be a monthly 10-minute phone call. Thayer's daughter Angela contacted investigative journalist Avery Haynes, begging for her help in freeing her mother. Haynes and her team conducted an investigation into Thayer's story, which they featured in a documentary. After spending 270 days behind bars, Thayer's case was suddenly dropped without explanation. Although they couldn't confirm the reasoning for the decision, many believed it was due to the attention that the documentary received. Thayer felt lucky to still be alive, as she believed someone involved in the scam would have went after her over the suitcase. She promised her family she was done with online dating. Remember to please keep an eye on any family members or friends that start talking to people they've only met online and make sure they aren't being lured into a scam. The growing elderly population is a popular target among scammers, so we need to take better care of them. Number 1. Dropping money. A group of 3 scammers snatched a shopper's credit card at a self-checkout counter in a Colorado Walmart. The thieves targeted the shopper as he was about to leave the store. One of the trio stood near a vending machine at the front of the store and dropped money next to where the man was checking out. The thief said the money fell out of the man's wallet and handed it to him. A female accomplice distracted the shopper into looking in a different direction while the scammer stole a credit card out of the unsuspecting customer's wallet. The man later reported almost $2,000 in fraudulent charges made using his card from the same Walmart he shopped at earlier that day. There had been an increase in credit card theft and scams in Walmarts across the country, particularly in Colorado. In less than 6 months, 3 men had installed credit card skimming devices at stores throughout the state and stole thousands of debit card, credit card, and gift card numbers. The men also allegedly used overlay skimmers, which mimic point-of-sale devices and credit card machines to steal customers' account information, such as expiration dates, full names, and account numbers. They collected at least 7,873 credit card, gift card, and debit card numbers. In early 2023, employees and law enforcement found multiple similar devices that scammers secretly put on checkout registers in multiple Walmart locations. It's best to always use the chip reader, or the tap when it's available, since it's far more difficult and rare to clone cards without using the mag stripe. Yeah, the chip is annoying, but it's less annoying than having your card info stolen. Who are the people that should be kicked out of society? Let's find out. Starting with number 4, out of time. Anthony Farrer ran a thriving luxury consignment business until FBI agents arrested him for scamming customers out of $3 million. Farrer's store, the Timepiece Gentleman, was located on Hollywood's Rodeo Drive. He drove around town in a Lamborghini or one of his Ducati motorcycles, lived in an insanely expensive rental in Santa Monica, and enjoyed frequent gambling trips to Las Vegas. Farrer shared photos and videos of watches to his 300,000 followers on Instagram and YouTube. His collection of expensive wristwatches included Patek Philippe's, Rolexes, and more, which he sold to collectors. People would ask him to consign watches for sale and agreed to Farrer taking a 5% commission on every sale. The problem is that the only person making money was Farrer. Some people wired Farrer funds to buy a watch, but never received it or got their money back. Others received pieces different from the ones they paid for. Farrer offered to give one upset customer a Rolex watch in place of a refund. Another victim consigned 75 watches to the scammer worth $3.2 million. He only got $385,000 back. Victims contacted law enforcement, but Farrer closed his store before police could get there. Farrer took to social media to come clean about his shady business dealings as the accusations grew. He said that he was in a lot of debt because of his gambling problem and had grown accustomed to a luxury lifestyle, so that totally makes it okay. Like, if you're used to living it up, why should you have to stop, right? As of this video, Farrer is in an LA federal jail awaiting his arraignment. If found guilty, he faces up to 20 years in federal prison. Always be wary of anyone who brags too much. Their stories almost never match reality. Looks like Farrer will be showing off his new slip-ons. Number 3. Extra sugar, please. Former 50s and 60s movie star Gina Lollobrigida's assistant, Andrea Piazzolla, stole $11 million from his former employer before she passed away at the age of 95. Piazzolla started working for Lollobrigida's assistant in 2009 when he was 21 and had met her through one of his friends who was the son of another employee. Piazzolla took on the job performing mindless tasks around the home, but at that point, his life was already in turmoil. Having never gone to college and barely supporting himself financially, Piazzolla often leaned on his girlfriends to look after him. When he got one of his partners pregnant, he denied the baby existed until she took him to court to force him to pay child support. But rather than learn his lesson, Piazzolla did the exact same thing with another girlfriend shortly after. Gina Lollobrigida was rich and famous, and mostly known for her roles in Beat the Devil and Trapeze, a couple of big films in the 50s. But as she aged, she experienced mental problems and needed a bit of help around the house. And Piazzolla, being a total parasite, saw her situation as a money-making opportunity and started licking his greedy chops. So, he moved into her home and worked hard to get close to her. But in order to get close, he needed to get rid of the other influences in her life. Piazzolla started planting ideas in his employer's mind, like he's Cobb from Inception, telling that her lawyer was stealing from her and that her administrator, Lollobrigida, worked with was the lawyer's spy. He also told the housekeeper, who was in her 80s and had a heart problem, that she had to leave the premises. Once Piazzolla mostly isolated her from the people in her inner circle, he became the sole director of Lollobrigida's company. But the assistant struggled to get her away from her husband, Spanish businessman Javier Rigau. Javier was the only person that Lollobrigida defended against Piazzolla's accusations. But as her mental decline worsened, Piazzolla finally convinced her that her husband had tricked her into a marriage without her consent. So, Lollobrigida cut ties with Javier, saying he tricked her into getting married the day before so he could access her money. While Javier denied the claims, there were reasons to be suspicious about his intentions with the star, who was once considered to be the most beautiful woman alive. In fact, during the height of her Hollywood career, he hadn't even been born yet. The two met at a party in Monte Carlo when Javier was 23 and Lollobrigida was 57. That's a 34-year age gap. Although the gap raised eyebrows, as it should, Javier insisted they were in a happy relationship until his late wife met Piazzolla. But there were accusations of faking their 2010 wedding since the couple had split 3 years before. Also, the marriage was done by proxy, where one person uses a stand-in rather than showing up. In this case, Lollobrigida using the stand-in, which is incredibly weird, but it's apparently a thing. Javier also appeared in a fraud and forgery trial in Italy in 2016. So it's not like it was difficult to convince Lollobrigida that something was up with her young husband. Lollobrigida testified that they always slept in separate rooms while traveling and never engaged in intimate relationships. These statements were a far cry from the one she made in Spain's Hola magazine in 2006 when she bragged about their passionate relationship. Javier said that he barely recognized the woman he saw in court that day. Lollobrigida spent a prolonged time in hospital following surgery for a broken femur and passed away in January of 2023. At that point, Piazzolla was in complete control of everything to do with her, especially her relationships. He even tried to stop her only son, Milo Skofic, from seeing her before she passed. The two once had a great relationship, with Milo frequently visiting his mother, but when Piazzolla came around, that all changed. Her assistant, doing his best impression of Grima Wormtongue, was there whenever he tried to visit or speak with her. Despite Piazzolla's attempts to block him, Milo was able to visit her when she was close to the end. He said his mother cried as she told him she had done everything wrong. During Lollobrigida's decline, Piazzolla stole from her so he could buy expensive properties, cars, and jewelry. He also emptied her home of furniture, which was an accumulation of one-of-a-kind items she had bought throughout her life from antique dealers in front of her eyes. Piazzolla had told her that he was having everything restored, and since they were antiques, it was easy to believe, but instead of restorations, he just sold it all at auctions. Javier and Milo eventually called the police, leading to Piazzolla's arrest, and he finally ended up in court. Parts of the trial occurred while Lollobrigida was still alive. She gave a testimony where she described Piazzolla as being like a son to her, and that her own child Milo only came around when he wanted something, which was probably something Piazzolla told her rather than being factual. The disgraced former assistant was ultimately convicted of taking advantage of the actress's weakened mental state in order to relieve her of her assets. Piazzolla received a 3-year jail sentence and faces 2 more trials for additional charges. Number 2. Homeless burglars. The police caught 2 Albanian immigrants attempting to rob a soccer player's $1.9 million home. Sebastian Joni and Skilidano Koliki targeted a wealthy part of Cheshire in England, often called the footballer belt due to the number of soccer players that call the area home. Joni and Koliki forced their way into the property at around 8 p.m. The homeowners were upstairs when they heard strange noises from downstairs. One of them looked outside of their bedroom window to see one of the 2 intruders walking up the staircase staircase with his face partially covered, which is typically not what you want to see walking up your stairs. Unsure if the robbers were carrying weapons, the homeowners panicked and locked themselves in their bedrooms so they could call the police. The pair were still in their room when law enforcement arrived 13 minutes later. Joni and Kaliki fled, leaving footprints in the recent snow on the ground, and with the help of a police dog, officers found the men. The two men hadn't damaged the property or taken anything from the premises. Joni immediately expressed remorse and told the police he was glad they caught them. He explained that they never wanted to cause damage to the property, but it was extremely cold outside, and he and Kaliki had nowhere to go. The authorities asked the two where they worked and how much money they made. Kaliki answered that he worked under the table and made $60 to $75 a day, while Joni admitted that he was homeless and hadn't been able to hold a job since he arrived in the UK in 2018. They were both in their early 20s at the time of their arrest and had entered Britain illegally when they were in their late teens, hoping to find work. Unfortunately, it had been a lot harder than they anticipated. Joni left Albania when he was 14 and headed to Germany. After a few years there, he arrived in Britain on a wagon and met up with his father, who was in the country legally. He worked to help support his mother and grandmother, who were still in Albania. Joni was extremely intelligent. He was fluent in Italian, German, and English, and conversational in Spanish and Portuguese. Kaliki, on the other hand, barely spoke English, making it almost impossible for him to find a well-paid job. He worked for people who exploited his desperation to find work and barely paid him enough money to get by. A friend told him that Manchester, often referred to as England's capital of the North, would have better job prospects, so he left London with Joni. At the time, Kaliki was ashamed to be living in his car. Both men pleaded guilty to burglary, and the judge sentenced Joni to 28 months in prison and Kaliki to 18 months. The defense asked for leniency with the migrants who would be in danger if they went back to their home country, and highlighted that they didn't take or damage anything on the property. They also stated that Kaliki's limited English would make jail extremely difficult for him. However, the sentencing judge sided with the victims, who were traumatized by the shock of having intruders in their home. Kaliki and Joni faced deportation when they left prison. For Kaliki, this meant putting his life in danger, as part of the reason he left Albania was because he was in the middle of a blood feud. What do you think is the right answer here? What are people supposed to do when they supposedly have nowhere to go? Number 1. The Bad Baroness. Baroness Michelle Mone used her social media platforms to tell the tale of her rise to fame and fortune after growing up in poverty, until she admitted to being connected to a disgraced PPE firm where they made personal protection equipment. Mone made first her name with Ultimo, a bra company, and she served as a member of the UK's House of Lords. She preached entrepreneurship and shared her fairy tale life story of going from rags to riches when she got the idea for Ultimo, the push-up bra that earned her fame and fortune. In the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, when shortages in personal protective equipment affected people worldwide, Mone had recommended PPE MedPro to the British government. So the company won a $253 million government contract, but there was something off about the entire negotiation. In May of 2020, Mone had reached out to Michael Gove, the cabinet office minister at the time, and Theodore Agnew to talk about contracts with the PPE company. In their conversation, she offered to supply PPE equipment via her team, which was fine, but the conversation occurred 5 days before her husband's business associates incorporated PPE MedPro, meaning PPE MedPro wasn't even actually a company yet, which makes it look like the couple was trying to profit off the pandemic. The firm entered the VIP lane that the government used for contracts with politically connected companies, but the products were nothing like what Mone promised. As an example, there was an order for a supply of sterile gowns, but they were unfit for PPE purposes and couldn't be used. Mone denied involvement in PPE MedPro until leaked bank documents revealed that her husband, Doug Berriman, had received $82 million in profits. He transformed portions of the money to a secret offshore trust, which Mone was a beneficiary of. Shady. After the money came through, the couple bought a private jet, a yacht, and several properties. Their actions put them on the National Crime Agency's radar, which raided two of the couple's multi-million-dollar homes. The House of Lords commissioner opened an investigation into Mone, but paused it pending the NCA's investigation. Mone made a public statement explaining she was taking a leave of absence to clear her name. For someone who wants to inspire online with her rags to riches story, she's sure up to a lot of shady business. But isn't that how it always is these days? It's like we're all getting catfished all the time by everyone. These are the criminals who were either born criminals or didn't know right from wrong. Let's get right to it, starting with number 5. dining and dashing. Paul Guadalupe Gonzalez gained notoriety as the dine and dash dater for his elaborate schemes to con women he met online using dating apps. Gonzalez ran his scam for 2 years and managed to bilk 18 women out of more than $950 by orchestrating expensive meals at upscale restaurants and then disappearing. Gonzalez employed a calculated approach to his scam. He would cruise dating apps like Plenty of Fish and Bumble to meet single women and then present himself as a charming and interesting man. After that, he would invite his victims to meet him at upscale restaurants. Once there, he would go on to order expensive meals complete with wine, filet mignon, shrimp, and multiple coffees, all while telling stories about his supposed participation in bodybuilding competitions. But just as the meal was over, Gonzalez would say he needed to make a phone call and walk out of the restaurant, leaving his unsuspecting dates to pay the bill. The losses incurred by these women added up to nearly $1,000, with some forced to cover their own expenses, while others got lucky and the restaurant paid the tab. Eventually, Gonzalez was caught and brought to justice. After his arrest, he pleaded no contest to 3 misdemeanor counts of defrauding an innkeeper by non-payment and 1 misdemeanor count of petty theft. His plea came after he had been arrested by Pasadena police the previous year. Gonzalez was sentenced to 120 days in county jail in addition to 3 years of probation. Furthermore, the court imposed a restriction on him, forbidding him from using dating apps Plenty of Fish and Bumble for the duration of his 3-year probation. His sentence also mandated restitution payments of $240 to 2 of his victims and enforced the requirement to stay at least 100 yards away from 5 specified restaurants. It makes you wonder why he'd go to all that trouble of getting a date just to get a free meal and talk about bodybuilding to some chick that's pretending to be interested. The man has to focus on that calorie maintenance and his protein intake, and we get that. But why go out on a date? He could have just done the same thing by himself, but with less consequences. He must have needed an audience to talk about his gains. Otherwise, it's just a boring meal without anyone complimenting him. Number 4. The smartest scammer. Nikesh Patel was a man with the potential to become a multi-millionaire entrepreneur, but instead he delved into a complex world of fraud and deceit. His story is one of scams, spending, and an escape attempt that ultimately landed him a 25-year prison sentence. Nikesh Patel used his charm and smooth-talking persona to operate a massive scam, selling $179 million worth of fake loans to a Milwaukee investment firm. He portrayed himself as the CEO of First Farmers Financial LLC, a Florida-based company, and used fabricated documents to convince investors that a portion of the loans were backed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In reality, these loans were completely made up, lacking actual borrowers or any governmental guarantees. The fraud extended from Orlando to Milwaukee, leaving a trail of small banks, municipal investment portfolios, and over 200 Chicago area municipalities severely impacted. Patel's scheme was so intricate, involving lies and counterfeit documents, that a judge actually referred to him as a diabolical genius. During the investigation, Patel managed to manipulate the legal system to his advantage. He convinced the judge to allow him to remain out on bail while awaiting sentencing, promising to aid in the recovery of funds to repay his victims. But instead of helping those victims, he just started another scam instead. Posing as a bank executive, Patel managed to pull off another sham loan scheme, pocketing the proceeds for his extravagant lifestyle. Patel then attempted a Hollywood-style escape plan. On the day of his sentencing, he was arrested at a Florida airport attempting to board a private jet. It turns out that Patel planned to escape to Ecuador with his family using ill-gotten assets to establish a new life of luxury. He intended to live in a multi-million-dollar home, buy luxury vehicles, and send his daughters to an English language school. Ecuador has been known to not honor extradition requests despite a treaty in places. As his escape attempt failed, Patel faced the consequences in a federal courtroom in Chicago. The judge handed down a 25-year prison sentence and expressed astonishment at Patel's ability to conceive and execute such an intricate plot and at the scale of devastation his actions caused to innocent victims. The complexity and success of the scam really shows what a waste of mind Patel was. This dude could have easily been a millionaire, but taking shortcuts ruined his life. Number 3. Dumping tires. Jacksonville, Florida resident Kenneth Stephen Landers pleaded guilty to charges linked with the misuse of nearly $1 million in Paycheck Protection Program loan funds. Landers got 7 PPP loans totaling $910,000 through submitting fake information and documents in 2020 and 2021. Instead of supporting businesses and preserving jobs as the funds were designed to do, Landers allegedly treated the loan money as a personal piggy bank. He spent the money on things like the purchase of an $87,000 vintage Jaguar XKE Roadster and a gold Rolex watch. Moreover, Landers withdrew over $100,000 in cash, wrote checks to himself, and built up his personal bank account. He also paid off his own debts, including mortgages on his waterfront home and his Northside tire business. As the investigation unfolded, it was discovered that Landers had also manipulated non-profits under his control, including the American Fallen Veterans Service Project, Inc. A once empty bank account under this organization's name surged to $200,000 following approval for a COVID relief loan. This particular misuse of these funds intended to support fallen veterans' families is pretty heinous. The story takes another strange turn as a driver for one of Landers' companies was implicated in dumping hundreds of tires on vacant property. Over a period of 2 days, the driver had dumped tires piling over 5 feet high. The caretaker of the property traced the tires back to Landers, who first claimed they weren't his because he pays a company $245 every week to deal with the old tires. Of course, the community was outraged. So, Landers was confronted by a local news channel accusing him of just dumping the tires to save money, an idea he rejected because why would he want to risk his business for a couple $100s by dumping tires? But then, surprise, surprise, Landers contacted the news reporter later that day and said that an employee of his had confessed to dumping the tires and that he did it on his own. Landers said he writes a check to the place that takes care of the tires, so his driver couldn't have just dumped the tires off and pocketed the money himself. But apparently, Landers wasn't working during the holiday period when the dumping occurred, so the driver was given cash that time and apparently pocketed the money himself. It's just speculation, but it seems a lot more likely that Landers did put his driver up to it in order to save some cash. The guy clearly has no issues with being shady. At the time of this video, Kenneth Stephen Landers awaits his sentencing date. He's looking at a potential 30-year prison sentence. Maybe Kenny was just tired of running his business. We bet he's deflated now. Number 2. A mission of personal wealth. Jason Gerald Schenk, a man once viewed as a devout missionary by Amish and Mennonite communities across Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, was at the center of a massive fraud case that shocked his supporters. Schenk positioned himself as a messenger of God and pledged to use his financial support he received from these communities to distribute Bibles and Christian literature in China, where the practice of Christianity is restricted by the Chinese Communist Party. However, over the span of 9 years, Schenk allegedly diverted more than $30 million in donations meant for missionary work to fund his lifestyle instead. His lifestyle included indulgences like diamonds, gold, sports gambling, and personal investments, including properties in Santiago, Chile, and shares in a private nuclear energy company. An arrest warrant was issued for Schenk on charges of defrauding charities and individuals through wire fraud and money laundering. A grand jury indictment outlined how Schenk allegedly concealed the source of the funds by laundering them through a complex web of international bank accounts and shell companies. Schenk's scam was said to have involved dozens of money transfers across multiple bank accounts, all aimed at masking the origins of the funds as donations from individuals and religious charities. The accusation suggested that he managed to acquire $22 million from one charity that supported aid for impoverished families and disaster victims, as well as an additional $10 million from another charity that aided human trafficking victims and missionaries with medical bills. Schenk's whereabouts remain unknown, but he's believed to be living outside the United States, and authorities are coordinating efforts across multiple countries to locate and apprehend him. He renounced his U.S. citizenship in 2016 to avoid financial reporting. If captured and convicted, Schenk could face up to 20 years in prison, along with substantial penalties and forfeiture of any assets tied to his alleged offenses. You always hear about charities being shady with donations, but this guy was literally just pocketing everything. He was clever to pick people that had a pretty low probability of catching on, but it also makes the scam that much worse, doesn't it? Number 1. Corruption everywhere. James Abori's transformation from a cashier to a corrupt Nigerian state governor sounds like a thrilling novel. The former politician gained notoriety for fraud and embezzlement during his time as the governor of Nigeria's Delta state, after being found guilty of stealing £157 million from the country's public funds. Abori's rise to power began with humble beginnings in the UK, where he worked as a cashier at a building supply store called Wix. He lost his job when he was convicted for petty theft and handling stolen credit cards. You would think these early brushes with the law should have been red flags for anyone considering a career in politics or government, but they almost seem like prerequisites. Upon returning home to Nigeria, Ibori became a politician and rose to the ranks of the ruling People's Democratic Party. As the governor of Delta State, he had an elaborate network of associates, including family members and close aides, siphoning public funds for his personal use. The money was spent on luxury homes, a private jet, top-tier UK boarding schools for his kids, and a fleet of armored Range Rovers. Ibori's methods for funneling money included rigged state contracts, kickbacks, and direct transfers from state accounts. He moved his money around the world, stashing it in bank accounts worldwide. Ibori's crimes eventually caught up with him, and he was convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison in the UK for conspiracy to defraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to make false instruments. Disappointingly, making false instruments basically means forged documents, not instruments that are just for show, like the towels in your mom's bathroom. Even Ibori's conviction was accompanied by controversy, as the sentencing judge criticized the ludicrously low amount of money that Ibori was charged with embezzling. The judge thought that the real amount could have been as high as £200 million rather than the £157 million. Ibori also faced the project of repaying over $101 million of his ill-gotten gains, or serving an additional 8 years in prison. This repayment order came after one of the most intricate confiscation proceedings in British history, showcasing the Crown Prosecution Service's determination to hold corrupt individuals accountable for their actions. We aren't just our past, and who we are now isn't always the person we were before. It would be unfair to be judged for something we did as a teenager when we're well beyond that in our years. So at what point do the mistakes of our past represent who we are now? It's hard to trust someone who claims to have never done anything wrong, because we've all done something wrong, but it's also hard to trust someone who repeatedly gets in trouble for doing wrong things. So what standards should we hold those we put in power to? How are some of these criminals just so despicable and heartless? Let's get right to it, starting with number 5. Ami in a Hellcat Revisited. YouTuber Bill Omar Carrasquillo ran one of the most successful TV piracy schemes that federal officials ever prosecuted. Carrasquillo ran the Omni and a Hellcat YouTube channel, where he shared slick videos set to hip-hop beats in which he showed off his extensive jewelry, his New Jersey mansion, and his fleet of high-end luxury cars. He also ran Gears TV and Gears Reloaded, a multi-million-dollar business where Carrasquillo and 2 accomplices opened dozens of Comcast and Verizon Fios accounts so they could hack the encrypted cable boxes. Then, they streamed and resold the copyrighted content, such as on-demand movies and TV shows, which they made accessible to their own subscribers over the internet for $15 a month. Carrasquillo's scheme attracted over 100,000 subscribers before federal authorities shut it down in 2019. He was indicted in September 2021 and pleaded guilty to copyright infringement and tax fraud. Carrasquillo formally apologized to his family, employees, and the companies he defrauded, saying he didn't realize the scope of his crime until his arrest. He received a 5.5-year prison sentence and was ordered to forfeit over the money he personally took home from his business, $30 million and $11 million in restitution to the cable companies. The crazy thing is, there was a moment in time he really thought that he wasn't doing anything wrong. Really. He had said, quote, "I don't think I ever did anything wrong. Obviously, I was running businesses wide open in the public. Now we are going to have our day in court. Carrasquillo also failed to report his business earnings to the IRS between 2016 and 2019, meaning he owed an additional $5.7 million in back taxes. Federal authorities froze the YouTuber's bank accounts during a 2019 raid and seized his collection of Porsches, McLarens, Lamborghinis, and Bentleys, as well as the over 4 dozen properties he owned in Philadelphia and the nearby suburbs. His Audi R8, 2019 Mercedes-Benz, BMW M8, and AMG GT63S were some of the vehicles included in an online auction put on by U.S. Marshals. However, the marquee lot in the auction was Carrasquillo's 2019 Lamborghini, which had several Power Rangers etched onto its rainbow-colored body. The vehicle featured the Mighty Morphin logo, the original green and yellow Rangers, and the Red Ranger from Power Rangers in Space. It sold for $380,000. Other car sales included a white 2020 Lamborghini Huracan for $209,000, a 2020 Bentley Continental for $150,000, and a police-grade 2017 Chevrolet Tahoe for $34,000. Despite him getting in trouble, he's continued showing off on Instagram, as well as having released a shoe line. Although they aren't the most attractive shoes on the market, they actually look like some off-brand shoe you'd find at Burlington, but at least he's trying to repay the millions of dollars that he owes. Any sneakerheads out there? What do you think of the shoes? Let us know in the comments. Number 4. Fair trade. Kadriana Hall and Serenity Banks shoplifted from a nail supply store, but returned minutes later when one of them realized she dropped her cell phone. The two women went into the California store and roughed up the owner as they ransacked the shelves. Then the two fled the scene, leaving the owner to tend to his minor injuries. Minutes later, one of these bright pillars of society realized that they dropped one of their cell phones, with one of those cases that holds your cards and ID, which, like, what are you gonna do, you know? So, not wanting to get caught, they returned to the store to retrieve it. The owner actually found the phone and said he would hand it over if they returned the stolen goods, which is actually incredibly reasonable considering what just happened. Well, the women weren't into that idea of being reasonable as well, and one of the women hit him a second time, despite the fact that the phone was worth twice the value of what they stole. The two left the scene in a black vehicle, and the police contacted them minutes later when they were sitting in the car outside their home about a mile from the store. The stolen merchandise was in plain sight inside the vehicle, so they got arrested. Would you have gone back for the phone though? You kind of have to, right? What would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Number 3. Faked investments. Financial planner Terrence Nugara swindled $10 million from clients in fake investments. Nugara tricked 28 clients into investing $10 million from their savings and retirement accounts. The disgraced financial planner convinced his clients to move their 401k and Social Security savings into private, self-managed accounts and invest in real estate development, which isn't exactly terrible financial advice, but there was a hiccup. Nugara's clients thought he was a property developer who had properties all around Australia and in Bali. Nugara had promised returns as high as 98.93% for their investments, which is crazy. He had pre-existing relationships with many of his victims, and he worked hard to earn their trust. The con artist even brought one of his victims flowers and took her out to lunch. He worked with another woman who began working with him when her husband passed away. Nugara also lured a man and his parents into investing in his scam. Rather than put the money towards investments, Nugara used it to fund his excessive lifestyle. He had a garage filled with expensive luxury vehicles and owned a boat and helicopter. Nugara's victims eventually learned the truth about his scheme in multiple ways. Several clients realized he was a scammer when they visited one of the supposedly developed properties and discovered the original building still hadn't been demolished. Another victim learned of the scam when a financial watchdog advised him to contact the police, and another found out through her lawyer. The police opened an investigation into Nugara's scheme, but he had already fled the country. Before he left, he got rid of all his assets, including his house, with plans to start over again overseas. But his international business ventures failed, and he returned to Australia, where he was arrested and charged with 27 offenses, including 2 charges of theft. He was sentenced to 10 years in jail. And why on earth would he return after leaving? Number 2. Lining her pockets. Black Lives Matter organizer Zara Salim raised thousands of dollars to help fund protests, and somehow that money went missing. Salim set up a crowdfunding page to raise money for things like face masks and other necessary equipment as the protests occurred in June 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Salim was a part of the BLM in Bristol, England, which garnered international attention when the crowd threw the statue of slave trader Edward Colston into the river. After the incident, Salim's crowdfunding page raised tens of thousands of dollars, reaching $36,000. Salim had promised that any excess funds would go to Changing Your Mindset Limited, a youth group that helped young people go on trips to Africa. However, none of the money made it to the charity. Many accused Salim, who changed her name to Yvonne Mena, of using the money for herself. The police conducted an investigation into Salim and finally arrested her. She pleaded not guilty to fraud, but later changed her plea to guilty. We can all agree that stealing donations that were intended to help those in need makes the crime a little bit worse, doesn't it? Number 1. Betrayed. Bitter ex-wife Colleen Campbell sold out her gangster ex-husband to his rivals to arrange an ambush that left him no longer among the living. The former cashier enjoyed a lavish lifestyle with her husband, Thomas Campbell, for almost 10 years, but their marriage ended when he cheated on her with one of her friends after a 2-year stint in prison. Despite his time behind bars, Thomas was an integral gang member, but created an enemy in John Belfield when he started a relationship with John's ex-girlfriend. So John contacted Colleen, and the pair plotted their revenge against Thomas. John and his accomplice went after Thomas late on a Saturday night as he returned home from a night of clubbing. The pair went to work on John, who passed away from his injuries. Colleen played the part of a grieving widow and poured her heart out to Thomas's family about how much she missed him, and his entire family embraced her and comforted her. A few days later, she told Thomas's mother that his ghost visited her to talk about the details of his passing, which Colleen shared with her mother-in-law. Colleen was eventually arrested for her involvement in Thomas's passing. She claimed that she thought they were only going to steal 2 of her late husband's Rolex watches, and that's why she gave them the details of his typical daily routine and home address. Daniel, Thomas's brother, wrote a victim impact statement where he called out Colleen for showing no remorse for her actions and deliberately hiding her involvement in his brother's passing. He added that she manipulated her children by telling them that she would be home soon and they would be a family again. Although her kids were from a previous marriage, they considered Thomas to be their father. The kids are living with Daniel while Colleen awaits her verdict and sentencing as of the release of this video. Who are some of the most heartless criminals out there? Let's find out, starting with number 5. She's really sorry. Here's an update on Daniela Rendon. The Miami real estate agent was busted for snagging more than $380,000 in COVID relief loans. She's someone we've covered before here. Rendon got hit with a 3.5-year prison sentence after copping to a guilty plea on 1 count of wire fraud, and she was staring down multiple charges: wire fraud, money laundering, aggravated identity theft. Rendon, originally from Colombia, flat out owned up to her actions, blaming her insatiable greed for leading her astray. Rendon had leased a 2021 Bentley Bentayga, rented a luxury apartment, splurged on cosmetic procedures, and collected designer shoes. And she wasn't shy about showing off her new status on social media. For her trial, Rendon brought a 30-page remorse thesis where she expressed how sorry she was for her choices. She admitted she used to think her victims were just faceless government entities, but she realized that wasn't the case. The judge took a look at her remorse thesis and, in the end, he opted for the minimum sentence of 3.5 years, cutting her some slack and sparing her an extra year behind bars. The assistant U.S. attorney was on board with this, recommending the same sentence. On the flip side, her defense attorney was hoping for 5 years of probation, an even more lenient move. The judge made it clear that Rendon's crimes weren't just some victimless escapade and drove home the point that her case is like a textbook example of how these scams mess with the funds meant for those who genuinely need them. Whatever else Rendon said in her thesis, there were 30 pages, and it certainly had an impact on the judge. And while it's good if it was sincere, the most sorry people in the world are the ones who got caught, which leads to the question: do you think she was sincere, or was it a ploy to manipulate the judge? Let us know in the comments below. Number 4. The photo finish. Neely and Andrew Moldovan found themselves entangled in a lawsuit for online defamation and its impact on a local photographer's livelihood. The story kicked off with the hiring of Andrea Pablito's photography services for their wedding and reception. Neely Moldovan asked about getting the high-resolution photos taken on their special day. According to their contract, the images would be released once the album was fully crafted, a process involving an order form submission and cover photo selection. But the couple balked at the $125 fee for the cover photo and grew increasingly frustrated with the photo delivery's delay. Things got a little more intense when the Moldovans reached out to local TV stations saying that Pablito was essentially holding their wedding photos hostage. The claim quickly snowballed, grabbing media attention and inciting a storm of social media outrage against Pablito's photography business. The couple took to various online platforms to vent their frustration, dropping allegations of deception and scamming against Pablito. This cyber onslaught, combined with the televised news coverage, dealt a severe blow to Pablito's business, causing bookings to plummet dramatically. The heart of the lawsuit revolved around the repercussions these actions had on Pablito's reputation and livelihood. Pablito said that the allegations swiftly dismantled her then 13-year-old business, and she openly shared the emotional toll the entire ordeal exacted. She recounted feeling humiliated by the torrent of name-calling and bullying that followed the accusations. The Moldovans defend themselves by claiming their right to express disappointment with the photography service and share their opinions online. They also claimed that they had become targets of impersonators who use fake profiles to amplify negative reviews, trashing their reputation. The jury's ultimate ruling was to award Andrea Pablito $1.08 million in damages. This verdict threw the spotlight on the issue of online defamation and its tangible, real-world consequences. The case underscored that while freedom of speech is a cornerstone of American life, expressing disappointment through digital channels can result in heavy penalties, especially when it strays into the territory of defamation. The Moldovans voiced their shock and disappointment at the jury's verdict. They insisted that the ruling could inadvertently silence consumers, making them feel afraid of voicing dissatisfaction due to the threat of being sued. They clarified that their intention was never to harm Pablito's business, but simply to express their honest opinion of the services they received. The Moldovans still have the option to appeal, keeping the story open-ended with potential future twists. So at what point does simply expressing an opinion become defamation? Are those giving opinions responsible for the actions of those reacting to the opinions? Let us know in the comments below. Number 3. Filing frauds. An ambulance-chasing lawyer named Stuart Finkelstein filed over 300 bogus lawsuits under the Americans with Disabilities Act in both New York and Florida and got himself 4 years in jail for it. Finkelstein targeted a bunch of public businesses where he cooked up tons of phony lawsuits about ADA violations, all in a bid to score settlements and grab a piece of the attorney's fees pie. He played the part of a representative for plaintiffs whose identities he'd stolen and who had no idea that he was representing them in lawsuits they didn't know they were a part of. One guy in the Bronx found out randomly that he was part of over 25 different ADA lawsuits that had been filed in his name, yet he was totally in the dark about them. Finkelstein managed to milk those lawsuits too, raking in a whopping $900,000 in attorney's fees. The businesses that were targeted all had to dig deep into their pockets for settlements and legal fees, leaving bills that ended up costing over $1.5 million. Finkelstein was eventually arrested and charged with mail fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. And this wasn't the first time Finkelstein had been accused of being a shady lawyer. He was disbarred in New York 10 years before all of this happened. He'd only been reinstated for 5 years before he decided to scam again. Finkelstein eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of mail fraud, and since the reinstatement was still fairly recent, the judge dropped the hammer, sentencing him to 4 years behind bars. He was also hit with over $800,000 in fines and forfeitures and 3 years of post-release supervision. The ridiculous thing is that all of his lawsuits with stolen identities probably didn't even need to happen. There's plenty of scandalous people who would have gladly lent their names to his fraud for a cut of the money, but instead he was greedy, and greed gets you caught. Number 2. The massage. Gareth Ward, a lawmaker from Australia, landed himself in quite a pickle during a visit to the Big Apple. Ward, who's legally blind due to a form of albinism, was staying at the Intercontinental Hotel in Times Square when things took a wild turn. Ward decided he wanted a massage, got a number from a buddy, and had 2 therapists sent to his hotel room. The 2 massage therapists show up, but the so-called therapists were not what they seemed to be. These 2 shady masseuses strolled into his room, and then the whole situation flipped. As Ward started to get undressed for his massage, the 2 told him they were underage and started recording videos on their phones, then hit him with a demand for $1,000. If he didn't pay up, they said they'd post the videos all over social media. Ward, who is blind, was worried he was going to get mugged or beaten. He didn't have any cash, so he told them he would go down to the hotel lobby to grab the cash from an ATM. But he actually headed to the front desk to seek some backup. The hotel clerk got on the phone with the cops, and the would-be extortionists made a run for it before the police showed up. Later, Ward opened up about the whole thing in an interview with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. He explained that he wanted a completely normal massage and was in the middle of undressing when the whole extortion thing started. Were these massage therapists aware of Ward's blindness and his gig in the Aussie Parliament? It's possible, since he's a public figure, but it's also possible that he was set up by his friend. Number 1. Medallion manipulation. Evgeny Friedman, a man who was known as the Taxi King of New York, had a life that played out like a Hollywood screenplay. Friedman, a Russian immigrant who was the son of a cab driver, takes on the concrete jungle and crafts an empire of taxicabs. Friedman bought hundreds of those official yellow cab permits known as medallions and, at his height, had over $525 million in assets. But his life wasn't just taxis. This guy lived lavishly. Luxury cars and mingling with the who's who, celebrities, politicians, you name it. Friedman had a 4,000 square foot townhouse on the Upper East Side, homes in the Hamptons and Chicago, and 2 villas in France. So you could say he was doing well for himself. But this taxi king wasn't just sitting back enjoying his success. He was like a puppet master, pulling the strings of the city's taxi market. He once pulled a slick move and intentionally overpaid for 54 medallions in a government auction. This drove up the value of the medallions he already had, like throwing a rock in a pond and watching the ripples go wild. Medallion prices shot through the roof, hitting a staggering $1.3 million each by 2014. Unfortunately, unsuspected cab drivers, many of them immigrants chasing the American dream, got caught in this bubble. They took out big loans and bought these medallions at insane prices, thinking they made a smart investment. But spoiler alert, the bubble burst. Cue the rise of Uber and Lyft. These ride-sharing giants shook up the whole taxi game, causing medallion prices to nosedive, crashing by up to 80%. And who was left holding the bag? The drivers, who sank everything into those medallions. Some faced financial ruin, others even took their own lives due to the pressure. As the taxi world crumbled, Friedman was revealed to be this mastermind who stashed his wealth offshore, away from the chaos he played a part in order to dodge paying taxes. As it turns out, the IRS takes those kinds of things personally, and Friedman was charged with tax fraud. Friedman eventually found himself in an Albany courtroom, facing the music on charges of tax fraud. He wasn't the same opulent guy as before, and he expressed regret owning up to the mess he helped create. To dodge prison time, he cooperated with the authorities, throwing his former partner, Michael Cohen, you might have heard of him, Trump's ex-lawyer, under the bus. Smart move, maybe. It kept him out of the slammer, but he still got to cough up millions in back taxes. It's ironic how the taxi king ended up getting in trouble for tax evasion. Okay, we'll go now. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section who you find more annoying, money gurus or scam callers.